Ahoy, hoy, everybody. We've got some great news about our second year in a row at San Francisco's Sketch Fest.
That's right. We have another live show on January 16th at 8 p.m. That's a Wednesday night at the Gateway Theater. And boy, do we have some special guests joining us.
That's right. Julia Prescott and Allie Gertz from the Everything's Coming Up Simpsons podcast will be our special guest, and we'll be discussing the episode The Principal and the Pauper. Is it the worst episode ever? Is it secretly good? We will decide on the stage that night.
So if you're looking for some fun and surprises, even more surprising than Armin Tamzarian's real name, you'll want to join us on Wednesday, January 16th, 8 p.m. at the Gateway Theater in downtown San Francisco. Look up those tickets for yourself or check out the schedule at sfsketchfest.com.
Tickets are going extremely fast, so if you want to come to this show, please go to sfsketchfest.com right now, and get your tickets soon.
I heartily endorse this event or product.
Ahoy, hoy, everybody. Welcome to TalKing Simpsons, where we develop healthy life adaptations. I'm your host, Twig Boy, Bob Mackey, and this is our chronological exploration of The Simpsons. Who is here with me today?
Henry Gilbert, and I would have liked to have done more podcasts, but I can't on account of my narrow urethra.
And who do we have on the line?
I'm Matthew J, and the J stands for Fix It Again, Tony.
And today's episode is the King of the Hill episode pilot.
Just a show about nothing.
That's right, we are pranking everyone out there for reasons. So previously in the history of Talking Simpsons, when The Critic premiered, we did Talking Critic, our first episode of that. And when Duckman premiered in The Simpsons chronology, we did Talking Duckman. And now, because King of the Hill debuted in season 8 of The Simpsons, we are doing Talk King of the Hill, one episode at least.
That's clever.
Possibly, this could be our mini-series in 2019 for the Patreon, patreon.com/Talking Simpsons, because I feel like it will be a front runner in the voting process. TBD.
That's only up to you, and I'm pointing at the audience, and by you, I refer to
By me?
which is you.
Okay.
We're so bit heavy here already, but we would have done it when it premiered in the Simpsons season, but we honestly just kind of forgot about that tradition of doing Simpsons-related animated series at the time. But now, when it also fits our schedule better for our upcoming live show, January 16th, get your tickets now, San Francisco. We're doing this one to push season 9 just one more week away.
And I think some of our fans out there have not heard our other podcast, What a Cartoon, and this could give you a taste of what a cartoon is like. In fact, we did the episode Peggy's Headache for What a Cartoon. And in case you don't know, What a Cartoon is very similar to Talking Simpsons, but we do another cartoon show and another episode from that show every week.
Matt J., our guest here, has been on that many times.
Yeah, I love that show.
And hey, plugs up front here for Matt J. You have a brand new podcast that fans of this show I think would really like, don't you?
Oh boy, I wasn't expecting this. My buddy Steve Yurko, who is an animation professional, and he's a storyboard artist who's worked on a bunch of shows, particularly shows for Adult Swim, have launched a new podcast that's all about Adult Swim. We're going through, in airing order, every show that Adult Swim ever aired, which at first was a great idea. We're quickly learning is not that great an idea. Season by season. So season 1 of Aqua Hunger Force was an episode. Season 1 of Sea Lab was an episode. So we'll revisit those shows as the seasons come up. And we've had all kinds of cool guests like Blair Gorman, who is the puppet coordinator on Robot Chicken. We're going to have... we have one very special guest that I can't say, that I'm trying not to say, that hasn't been announced yet. But I will tell you, when you guys look at the podcast feed and see that guest, you're not going to believe it. But we're also doing one tonight with Alan Denton, who is the writer on Sonic Boom. He's going to talk about Harvey Birdman with us. And our Patreon show at patreon.com/The Deep End, which is the name of the show, The Deep End. We're doing every episode of The Venture Brothers in order, because that's
awesome.
The greatest show of all time. So
gimmick infringement there, brother. That's wrestling terminology, sorry.
This is bad form for a podcaster, but I demand to be on your Assy McGee episode when that happens.
Oh, okay. Sure. I mean, nobody else has requested that one, so sure.
I kind of secretly love that show.
That's been an issue, is we go to people and are like, hey, we would love to have you on the show. What show do you want to do? And they're like, and they'll mention a show that's like Rick and Morty or something. We're like, okay, that'll be in 3 years. So
right.
We'll see you then.
I'll talk to you in 2021 about that.
But who wants Minority Team, huh?
Oh my God. I just had to recall that.
Yes, yeah. We wouldn't do that on What a Cartoon because it's not animated.
Minority Team's not animated?
No, I mean, it's just a slideshow. That was my joke.
Oh, I see what you mean.
But it did have Dana Snyder doing a voice I don't want to hear again.
Oh, geez. Yeah, I remember that now.
Let's move on from that unpleasantness. So we talked about King of the Hill on What a Cartoon. Check out that episode if you want to hear more. But we also talked about the history of King of the Hill. And instead of rehashing that here, we will just cut in that segment of What a Cartoon for you to listen to right now.
This was Mike Judge, 1995. It started working on it, right?
With Greg Daniels of The Simpsons, who read episodes like Bart Sells His Soul, I believe Secrets of a Successful Marriage, Homer and Apu. He left The Simpsons, and he probably would have been a showrunner if not David S. Cohen, if not Mike Scully.
Midway through season 7, they're actually pretty sad on season 7. Like, we lost Greg. He was really great. Like, he was Milhouse. That's who Greg says. Like, he was Milhouse as a kid. He looks the most like Milhouse of any Simpsons.
And if you look at King of the Hill and Greg Daniels' other shows that he ran and created, like the American version of The Office and Parks and Rec, he is very good at building very specific places and putting very specific people that you would not see on shows. Like Ron Swanson, he's very Hank Hill in some ways, but he's also a very unique character that you would not see on another show. And there's a lot of that going on in King of the Hill. Like Dale Gribble is like one of the first characters of this type I've ever seen, not in reality. I mean, my uncle was Dale Gribble. He belonged to a gun club. I shot guns with him. He always wore a ball cap and sunglasses because he was bald. He loved conspiracy theories. He thought Bill Clinton killed people. In fact, I think either Mike Judge or Greg Daniels said the one accurate thing that we didn't make Dale was racist, because if Dale was all of these things, he would also have to be racist. And my uncle was racist.
I know that all of his traits in real life are 9,999 times out of 10,000 a racist asshole. So they have to be like, well, but this is the one that isn't. This guy's okay.
In real life, he'd be like, hey, Hank, you know about those globalists, right?
Those triple parentheses. You heard about these?
But I'm glad that... So Dale is my favorite character, and I love Hank. But I have a Dale Gribble action figure. Actually, the King of the Hill... I was working at GameStop. Wait, no, Spot. No, Stop.
No,
I was working at GameStop when they came out.
Website or store?
It was both. But they were called in-action figures. But it comes with a beer, and he's holding a cigarette, and I love Dale Gribble so much.
Well, my favorite, who doesn't get much in this episode, is Bill.
He's got some good lines, but it's not about him.
No, I love Bill in that I have struggles with depression as well, so I like that in Bill. But I like that he is the saddest. He is stupid, but not the dumbest. He's smart enough to know he's in a horrible place, and that's why he's sad.
Yes.
It's like, Lenore.
He's more of a realistic Homer, where Homer should be upset about the state of his life, but isn't.
I know. Just all his things like his barely hidden love for Peggy. He's like, the time when he thought Hank said that Peggy had a twin, he's like, two Peggy?
Yes.
You mean a Peggy that's not married to Hank?
Again, that running joke would pay off in an episode where Peggy basically is running a pyramid scheme and forcing Bill to help her. And they go off together on a trip, and it's very awkward.
Yeah.
But it all pays off. Like these running jokes, including one of the first jokes in the series, that when Joseph is revealed, he's revealed as a small brown child, not white like Dale, not white like Nancy. And that is a gut punch visual joke that they have to stick with as a story element.
For 255 episodes.
Yes.
It's just for a one-off joke. Yeah. Well, who's your favorite, Matthew?
My favorite character in the whole show? Oh my god, it's so hard to pick. I go back and forth. One thing that I do really enjoy is I love when, we're talking about status quo. I love when characters can evolve. Like Dick Grayson's my favorite comic book character, because we've seen him go from an 8-year-old to he's led the Justice League and the Outsiders. And
he has the best butt in comics.
I love that canonically he has a great butt. That's the best.
Every artist has to draw.
You have to learn how to do it, and it's always a square. They always know it's square. But anyway. I love that, and I don't consider myself a big fan of Joseph, but the change he makes, where he changes from Brittany Murphy to Breckin Meyer to doing that voice, it just kills me every time. It's so funny. He basically
becomes puberty incarnate, like a dumb, sex crazed teenager.
Dumb and frustrated. He's like, why can't I do this?
But in terms of character, I mean, and that's a very the kids I identify with, because I was literally going through puberty as that character did, and that was that was an interesting thing for me to experience.
What a perspective.
Yeah, and the cartoons, I didn't get to see cartoons do that.
Yeah.
But I to this day, as a little kid growing up with my normie ass family, who was like, I wished I was Jewish and Canadian because I was a little comedy nerd. Like, I identified with Bobby so hard because I wanted to be a performer. And then I eventually, like in my
early 20s, started taking improv classes and that kind of stuff. And I, to this day, every time I pick up a new like artistic hobby, I think of Bobby, you know, trying to spread his wings and be artistic, and his dad just trying to tamp him down to being normal.
Those are the best episodes.
Well, especially, what are you talking about?
Or like going to the deli and getting gouts because he eats too much weird fish.
That Bobby is the original fail son. Like he was, he is the guy that is cursed upon the high school football star who's like dreams of, when I have this son, he's gonna, obviously as a pudgy fail son myself, I could identify with it sometimes too much, but that boy ain't right. That defines him. That Hank thought he was going to have a future football star, and he's a weird kid listening to toilet sounds.
Yes. And it was a miracle that he was born because of Hank's narrow urethra, and he just is like, this is the one that we got. But he loves him because he's his dad and he's a great son.
He's my boy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, sorry, I threw us all off track with that Hank Hill out of nowhere.
Don't stop.
Yeah, I mean, that's the great dynamic between them, and you never get a sense that Hank hates Bobby. He's just like trying to understand him, which is why it's a very, very sweet show. So I wanted to talk more about the development of the show. Sure. So I think the comic sensibilities of Greg Daniels and Mike Judge are very different, but they like very specific characters. And I think like the soft libertarianism of Mike Judge pairs well with the sort of more leftist influences of Greg Daniels to sort of make it a show for kind of everybody, because you can watch the show and be like, oh, I'm on board with Hank. This stuff is weird. I'd be like Hank. Or you could be like watching it as an overeducated jackass like me and be like, yes, Hank is very naive, and the humor is all from him being very naive about things. It's like, it makes it a show that doesn't really look down on the characters, I think.
Yeah, not really. I think that too is when there's stories of when Mike Judge like came back to the show was because he had left the show under other showrunners and he would come back because he felt they were making Hank the joke too much.
Yes. Although I say I love those seasons. That's 5 and 6, I believe.
Yeah,
and
I had
there's
a lot of fun with those.
So many great episodes, including Alabaster, the one where Hank becomes a pimp unwittingly. I mean, I think that's the one everyone remembers.
I am the Mac Daddy of Arlen County.
But I'm pimping that propane. And that Mike Judge did the amazing thing that he'd never had to do, and I wouldn't think anyone in Hollywood would do this, is that he was working on the show and they coupled him with Greg Daniels. And then he was like, Greg, you've given so much to making the show work. You're the co-creator now. Like, Mike Judge had the sole creator credit, which means millions of dollars. To then say someone is your co-creator, you are giving them millions of dollars that you could just keep. There's a lot of credits in animation and in just regular American TV of created by blank, developed by blank. And those things really just mean someone's getting paid less in residuals than the other
More
person.
money to them, less money for them.
Every time you see an image, I remember like learning, oh wait, Matt Groening didn't draw every image of The Simpsons. His name's just on it.
Troy McClure covers that in the clip show, actually. So I have a clip of the pitch pilot sort of thing they made for Fox, and Hank is talking directly to the president of Fox TV at the time, John Matoyan, I think his name is, and we talked about him a lot on Talking Critic.
What an asshole.
He is the asshole who canceled the Critic and like called Al Jean and Mike Reese into his offices like, tell me why this show is funny. You will sit here and watch this show with me, and I want you to tell me why you think it's funny.
And his job for 2 years at Fox was to only make NBC style must-see TV style shows, which failed. Like Ned and Stacey has good actors on it, but who ever thinks of that show?
They're all making like what, friends likes?
Yeah, all friends alike.
Yeah.
Coupling ripoffs.
So here is the pitch pilot, whatever you want to call it. It's all on YouTube, but here is a small portion of it.
Well, Mr. Matoyan, I'd say y'all got the makings of a damn good cartoon here. I mean, you got my wife, Peggy, and she's real smart. She teaches Spanish.
I sure do. Yo hablo español.
Isn't that something? And I'm real proud of my boy Bobby because he, because he's my boy.
A bee stung my head.
Put some ice on it, son. And Luann's living with us now since the tornado.
Hello, Hollywood. Love your movies.
She'll probably be real good for ratings, the way she dresses.
There you have it. He introduces everybody, but
dresses.
this seems like maybe just part of the pitch pilot because it feels like there was something before that. Because he's like, "Well, there you have it,"
Yeah.
at the-
And that's obviously not Kathy and Jimmy and all those actors. That's what's her name from The Simpsons?
Oh boy.
Well, it sounded
First I
like
was thinking-
Pamela. No, Tress. Was it Tress?
At first, I thought Tress McNeil, but it might be Pamela Hayden. I'm gonna have to look this up.
Yeah, I don't know
Sorry.
if that was Kathy and Jimmy, but obviously it was
definitely
Mike
not.
Judge. And there's one commentary that's not done with characters on all the DVDs, and it's very. I wish
it drives me crazy.
Yeah.
I was like, have some fucking care for this. Tell me about it.
I
Like,
could be the King of the Hill historian like I am the Simpsons historian, because those Simpsons commentaries are basically where we get all of our knowledge about everything that ever happened.
You can read more on it. There's more information out there in interviews, including interviews we've done. But yeah, the King of the Hill is more opaque in that way.
Yeah.
Like I mean, Bob and I got some insight into it too, going to the King of the Hill live 20th anniversary show that we went to last year.
Last January, they did the live reading of Husky Bobby, and it was amazing.
It was so
Yeah.
That is a great episode.
Every living regular cast member was there to read their parts, and Pamela Adlon was there to read the Brittany Murphy roles, and she did
that's
an
nice.
amazing job.
Yeah.
And then someone asked her, "What's it like to have a dead person that used to work
Yeah,
with you?"
everybody was just like, these Q&As don't have to ask make them think about their dead friend who they can't not be thinking about right now. Maybe have fun questions.
But the one thing I wanted to bring up from the little that we know about the production of the show based on commentaries is that Mike Judge did not want to be Hank Hill. He did not want to voice the role of Hank Hill, because it's like, this is a voice I already do. This is a voice people know. It's a major character on Beavis and Butthead. I want a different person, but they couldn't find anybody. And I got to say, even though it was weird being a Beavis and Butthead fan to hear Mr. Anderson as a new character, but it's just like this, there is no cartoon voice like Hank Hill's. It is like one of the greatest cartoon voices ever, because Mike Judge is not a professional voice actor. You get sounds out of that guy that no polished voice actor will be able to do. Like Beavis and Butthead and Hank Hill are all like, no one else is doing those voices.
And then he would eventually make a show that just started his hippie teacher as well.
Yeah.
The Good Family.
I never gave it a chance.
I've yet to watch it.
It sounded so one note. I expect it to be good.
It was supposed to be the hippie version of King of the Hill.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be the inverse, the other side of the coin, if you
I've heard
will,
it's better than it got credit for, but I have yet to dig into it. But he also, do you remember when he went on Space Ghost and he illustrated the difference
was
between
so
those two
good.
voices?
Oh, yes.
And he's like, "No, this is Hank Hill. That boy ain't right. Now this is Mr. Anderson. I tell you what. And this is Mr. Anderson. I tell you what."
I think over
Totally
time, Hank Hill would, everyone would, have more energy, as happens with every animated show. People pick up the pace, but I think Hank Hill would eventually become some degree removed from Mr. Anderson over time. Like,
He'd grown to his own, but man, seeing Mike Judge in person at that thing, like,
Yeah.
whoa,
he sinks his face into his chin to talk like Hank Hill. It's
Yes.
great.
He is watching him do that stuff is a great lesson in voice acting, where you
Yeah.
see, if you watch, we have talked about it on some other show, that movie, the documentary, I Know That Voice. Some of the people do show off, like, okay, I have to touch my throat like this to do that character, and I have to do it a certain way, or I might break my voice. like this.
That's amazing.
Or, the way Tom Kenny does SpongeBob's laugh is he slaps his
Oh,
throat
God,
over and
yeah.
over again.
That's going to injure him one day. But yeah, Mike Judge, he transforms into Beavis and Butthead when he voices them. If you've
He
ever
pulls
seen
his lip
those,
up real high.
it's so great.
beautiful. And the rest of the cast is some of my favorite ever. Like,
Yeah, again, not a lot of voice actors in the cast, like Kathy Najimy and Brittany Murphy before she briefly became a big star, and then came back to the show when that wasn't really
Before she was
working.
the ramen girl.
Yes.
They moved her across the streets.
Oh, man,
Yeah.
that was. Or also, Kathy Najimy was like fresh off Hocus Pocus, and
Yeah.
she was starring in stuff. She was not. She was still an actress,
Right, but
in things.
not a voice actress.
But
though.
Stephen
Pamela
Root
Adams-
also.
Oh, Stephen Root is my favorite. When I watched Get Out again recently, I was like, "Yeah, Stephen Root, you're so awesome!" Like he is the greatest in everything. Stephen Root, he can be serious. He can put on a silly voice like or like him as the judge in Idiocracy is the funniest 2 seconds of that movie. And same with. Though I also loved him as Jimmy James on News Radio. He fucking rules at that.
He's so good in that role. So
Yeah.
King of the Hill differs from The Simpsons in that it focuses on smaller, more observational stories, which was what Greg Daniels wanted to do. And his other goal was to have each character have an emotional epiphany or come to a realization that may change them at the end of each episode. And that really happens here. But I do want to say what I like about the show compared to The Simpsons, and I love The Simpsons, is that in The Simpsons, a lot of humor comes out of characters acting consistently, like Homer suddenly knowing about a Supreme Court judge,
Mm-hmm.
or Moe reading, to sick children in a hospital. All of the humor in King of the Hill comes from characters acting consistently. Like, it's still a laugh line, like when you realize, of course, Hank has the warranty for his sander in his wallet. But it's like, yes, of course Hank would do that. That's why it's funny. It's not characters acting like against type where the humor comes from, which I like.
Yeah, and Dana Gould, I think in our interview or in some other thing about The Simpsons, he summed up Simpsons comedy style so well in saying that The Simpsons joke begins where the regular joke ends. There's what you would assume the joke would be, and then they go against even that expectation. That is the punchline. But on King of the Hill, I think it goes in the opposite direction of like it solidifies your expectation.
And I mean, those are harder jokes to write, which is why I think they have to try a lot harder on this show. They can't make like Hank totally does something wacky against type now. It's like, no, Hank is very rigid. We need to find things that he would do and top ourselves, like to add to his rigidity.
Yeah, one of my favorite examples of that would be when Hank was being told to pay a late fee on pornography he did not rent. And he was so insulted that would even happen. And instead, he was so rigid, like, I will not pay a late fee that isn't mine, that he then watches hundreds of pornos to then find his legal reasosoning for it couldn't have been a movie he rented.
That's a great, and Bill helps him as a master of porno knowledge.
He was the deep throat for him, no pun intended on that. I love that end where Bill is the guy secretly taking back his porno tape.
Let the record show, Mr. Hill, you do know your pornography.
And with that consistency thing, have you ever looked at the design notes for the characters? And those are incredible because they're covered in notes about like Peggy cannot stand this way because that's not right. She stands this way, and they even explain like Peggy is conventionally attractive. We're fighting that all the time. Like she needs to have this posture. Her hair cannot look differently than this.
And you cannot give her these curves. This is not. I mean, Wes Archer should get a ton of credit on this here too. That Wes Archer,
a Texan too.
Yeah,
with a name Wes Archer. What else could he be?
Wes Archer, in case you don't know, he was one of the original animators on the Simpsons shorts on Tracy fucking Ullman. He had worked on The Simpsons until season 7, just like Greg Daniels as well. I believe his last directed episode was Two Bad Neighbors. Or maybe one right after that. But so he was one of the best artists on this, directors on The Simpsons, and then they pilfered him for King of the Hill to be the series director of the show. And so all those notes are from him of like, Hank's eyes would not go this way. His teeth would not go this way. I was just reading through the Steven Universe design docs too. Like there's tons of every cartoon, I think has those rules you don't know about because you're not reading the series Bible. But when you see them, you're like, that's why the show, those kinds of rules were invisible but made the show better.
There's even like acting notes, like characters do not high five each other unless it's in the script. Like don't make them too like gesticulaty and wacky and stuff like that. They're very rigid, stiff white people.
And another thing about that is Brian and Mike, the creators of Avatar: The Last Airbender, they worked on the show, and they were I think directors on the show, and they it might have just been one of them, might have just been Brian.
I did not know that.
But at least one of them worked on the show, and they went on to create the most fantastical, crazy show with kung fu elements and stuff, and it was almost cathartic for him to be like, I've been working on King of the Hill for years, because he would have fights with Mike Judge and Wes Archer and these guys, because they'd be like, oh, you can't fit a camera there, and he's like, it's a cartoon, and they're like, yeah, but a camera wouldn't fit there, so it doesn't make any sense.
It's not as fun too. So there's no so Futurama has Morbotron and Simpsons has Frankiac. There is no King of the Hill search engine, but it's a less fun show if you're looking for poses and things like that, because they do act like real people. It's a very like well-made show.
Yeah,
but the acting is very human-like.
If a man is in his 60s and overweight, that he's not going to move all that much. He's just going to be like, I'm tired.
And that's why I get a little snippy when people are like, why was the show even animated? And it's like, there are thousands of reasons why the show should and could only be animated. One of them is it's shot like a Coen Brothers movie.
Yeah.
Like, it's shot beautifully, but they're shooting mundane things. That's the trick.
So that was our history of King of the Hill from What a Cartoon. Again, that is a free podcast. Check it out. Look up What a Cartoon wherever you find your podcast. And it's also available at the Talking Simpsons Network at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. But this episode aired on January 12th, 1997. And as always, Henry will tell us what happened on this mythical day in real-world history.
Oh boy, Bobby. This aired on the same night as the Springfield Files. So if folks remember on that, that's when the People's Choice Awards happened, and Mel Gibson and Tim Allen won big there, as did Sandra Bullock. And my beloved Jacksonville Jaguars lost the AFC Championship game, keeping them out of the Super Bowl once again.
Wow.
And Jackie Chan's first strike debuted in theaters, a pretty good Jackie Chan movie. It's
Baseball movie, right?
No, it's
Okay.
it's the unofficial fourth in the cop police story super cop trilogy of films. It includes the amazing ladder fight. If you've seen him like spinning a ladder around a head, punching through a ladder, that fight, that's from First Strike, as is a scene where Jackie Chan shows his butt. So if you want, you get all kinds of fun in that
A
movie.
little something for mommy. Well,
I only
okay.
the first two police story movies, but I love them dearly, and they're coming to Criterion soon.
Ooh, about time.
It is so overdue. Police Story is seriously one of the most important films in action movie history. Like it completely changed it.
But the People's Choice Award, that's what the first news item was, right?
Yes, yeah.
So Mel Gibson, Tim Allen, and Sandra Bullock. I think Sandy B is the only one who came out smelling fresh because Mel Gibson had some things to say about Jewish people. And then Tim Allen says he felt like a Jewish person in Nazi Germany. We don't have any comments about Jewish people from Sandra Bullock yet.
She's I don't believe so.
That's
I think
good.
She's been on the good side of things, which
She seems cool.
yeah, I think so. She had bad things happen to her, but then she as in like public divorce from a dude. But yeah, now she was just in that popular movie where she's blindfolded. Blindside, right? No,
The Bird Box.
Yes, yeah.
Bird Box.
Blindside was a different Sandra Bullock.
I have
film.
not seen Bird Box. I don't know if I ever will, but I just like the name Bird Box. It's just funny.
I thought it was, and this is true. Somebody told me a couple months ago they're making a movie for Netflix called Bird Box, and my first thought was, it's about it's going to be like a Black Mirror about Twitter, right? Like that's their dumb name for your phone. And
Wow.
two of my friends and I will tell if we're like hanging out and someone's looking at their phone too much, we'll be like, "You looking at your Bird Box too much?"
Oh my God.
I think we're gonna keep that going, even though we know that's not the truth anmoore.
I'm going to steal that, Matthew. I will give you credit eventually.
What if your bird
make
box
a little
talked
Bird
about
Box in your
you?
Oh,
that's
social
it,
commentary.
Well, also, I guess too, this when this episode comes out, basically 22 years to the day with when the pilot debuted too.
Oh, nice.
And it was next to, listeners know we didn't love the Springfield Files episode. There were some problems with it, but it's a fun episode. But it was definitely one of the ones Fox loved more than just about anyone because it was the most easy to promote for all their stuff. So you have an event like the X-Files crossover, then you follow that right up with King of the Hill.
And King of the Hill was the huge hit Fox was looking for, the huge animated hit, because, the Critic didn't work, and I don't think there was anything after the Critic until King of the Hill, but King of the Hill did work. And then nothing worked after King of the Hill until Family Guy, which had to work eventually. It took a cancellation for it to work.
Well, and we all know how Simpsons alum Mike Reese feels about King of the Hill with regards to Critic, is the show he co-created.
Yes, he's not a fan, and his comments confuse me.
Yeah, I mean, Hank Hill is not Homer Simpson in glasses. But secondly, he should feel, here's what I do agree with Mike Reese on slightly, is that the Critics' moderate success did prove that an animated show after The Simpsons would be a hit. And then Fox wanted to go with a show they created as opposed to a borrowed show from ABC, like The Critic in its place. But that does not mean that King of the Hill is a bad show because that was the business reasons behind them wanting another animated show. And also, King of the Hill's first season is better than the second season of The Critic. I mean,
Yeah.
the second season of The Critic takes some wild swings and it's really funny, but you could also feel like, boy, you're getting tired. Like you were running out on this premise here. I don't fault John Matonin at all for going with the King of the Hill over Critic.
He seems like an awful man, but
Sure
yeah,
does,
I understand that. And I think this first season is very strong. I've been watching it because it's been on Hulu. I also own most of the DVDs. And watching this pilot again, I expected it to be much slower, to have fewer laughs, to have the characters be much different. But really, honestly, Peggy Hill is the only character they haven't figured out yet. She is, I would say, moderately different than who she would eventually become. come.
I think this pilot is one of the best pilots I've ever seen because if you compare this to the intended first episode of The Simpsons, that sucks. Like Some Enchanted Evening sucks compared to this. This has it all figured out. They know who their core characters are, what they're going to use them for. Like they introduce all these interpersonal relationships that are going to define the show until the last episode.
And this episode is crammed full of running jokes, characters that would be used extensively. The only thing that's missing really is Strickland Propane and Buck Strickland.
Yes, yeah. Wang Con Superphone.
That's right,
well.
but he shows up in a big episode soon.
Yes, yeah. But like Cotton's there. He even does mention he sells propane and propane accessories. They do mention that, so they know it's there. But yeah, this is such a fully realized pilot made by such pros who also clearly had a lot of time to work on the pilot. Like the Simpsons pilot, it's really apple and oranges to compare Some Enchanted Evening to this pilot because the Simpsons paved this road for them.
No one knew how to do that before
Yeah.
them. The technology was
way.
lost.
And I mean, this is so many borrowed people from Simpsons, like especially Wes Archer as animation director. He was an OG on The Simpsons, so he could show them from the pilot forward how to make this show.
Yeah, it's kind of like this episode's even like more ambitious than the show would become, which I guess is a piloty thing. But like that intro with the showing you the flat suburban Texas landscape really lays the show out and would only be, they mirror it once, which I think is in the last episode.
The finale is a
But-
similar pan away. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, but it's so like it's almost weird because of the show becomes about the banality of, can you believe that we're making a cartoon that looks like this so quickly after that? And I just did a full rewatch of the show because it's on Hulu and I've watched every episode again.
Wow.
Yeah, I was a lot of like putting it on while doing other things.
Mm-hmm.
And I also realized how little of the last couple seasons I had seen, which I guess, I was like ready to become an adult at the time and not watching as many primetime cartoons.
I think Fox did not air the last 4 episodes. I think they aired on Adult Swim.
Oh, wow.
And much later than when they were produced, too.
But I skipped season 1 on my rewatch and kind of jumped around a bit and then went back and watched season 1 last. I was amazed by how much it felt like later on in the show, especially like the jokes are like exactly the same jokes that they were making in the last season. Like I feel like some of the character, like I think it's weird that they all watch Seinfeld. Like it's stuff like that I feel like that's the only thing that's like weird.
I feel like Hank hates New York City so much in later episodes he would never watch Seinfeld. He probably would
Never.
block it off the TV or something if he could.
Yeah, Bobby would watch it and tell him to watch it, and he would not.
Yes.
It's funny, Dad.
Closed captioning sponsored in part by
Welcome to the break, folks. Hope you're enjoying this week's special Talking Simpsons installment where we're going through the pilot of King of the Hill. This was a great episode of TV, and I hope you guys are enjoying it too. And a special thank you to our guest, Matthew J., for coming on and talking some more about King of the Hill with us, as he did on our podcast, What a Cartoon, which you should definitely check out. And check out all the rest of our cool stuff at patreon.com/Talking Simpsons. All the subscribers there make doing this podcast possible for me and Bob as our full-time job. We have tons of supporters, and if you were to sign up, not only would you be helping us out, but you'd get every episode of Talking Simpsons and What a Cartoon a week ahead of time and ad-free for just $5 a month. You'll get your own specialized podcast feed that you can put into any podcast listening service you use. Just sign up and you'll be able to hear every episode a week ahead of time and ad-free. You could be hearing The City of New York versus Homer Simpson right now and hearing our thoughts about it with our special guests. And you could also hear tons of exclusives like our mini-series Talking Critic, where we went through every episode of The Critic, Talking Futurama, where we did the entire first season of Futurama. Those are both exclusive to the Patreon, and we'll be doing another exclusive mini-series real soon, so you'll want to check that out. Patreon.com/Talking Simpsons, and even better, for our $10 premium patrons, you'll get a monthly What a Cartoon movie podcast where me and Bob go through a different animated film in the same What a Cartoon style, like Kiki's Delivery Service, Batman, Mask of the Phantasm, and in January, Akira. You can check all of that out and tons more at patreon.com/Talking Simpsons. This is your last chance, folks. If you can be in the San Francisco area on January 16th at 8 p.m., you can see our live podcast at SF Sketchfest at the Gateway Theater at 8 p.m. January 16th. That's Wednesday at 8 p.m. Gateway Theater. We'll have special guests, Allie Gertz and Julia Prescott from Everything's Coming Up Simpsons. It's a Simpsons crossover extravaganza. You'll not want to miss it at SF Sketchfest. Be sure to check it out on the SF Sketchfest schedule, or just head on down to the Gateway Theater in downtown San Francisco, 8 p.m. on Wednesday, January 16th. We will see you there.
You're watching Non-Stop Fox, where the new comedy King of the Hill premieres tonight. Presenting a new comedy
I'm a substitute Spanish teacher.
about intellectuals
Los estudiantes son mis amigos.
and their gifted offspring.
That boy ain't right.
About future Hall of Famers
Watch the ball!
What?
and expert auto care.
Ah, my head!
Introducing King of the Hill.
Media executive manager talk about every time y'all come on like you did, put on that dang old Melrose Place. Boomhauer ain't right.
Premiering next on Fox.
One thing that's changed for me since we watched it for What a Cartoon, that we've done more What a Cartoons, it made me appreciate like the animation pipeline to make this show work too was figured out by Phil Roman at Film Roman. And that's why they're the animation production company for this too. Like this, compared to Beavis and Butthead, which we loved Beavis and Butthead when we did that on What a Cartoon, but this is such an advancement over it. And it feels like if Beavis and Butthead happened in a realer world, there's several scenes in this episode I'm like, well, this is a Beavis and Butthead scene, except reality instead of satire is what's happening.
After you watch King of the Hill, you realize Beavis and Butthead live in Texas.
Yeah,
if it's not
yes.
obvious immediately, you're like, oh, they're living in the King of the Hill world, pretty much. I'm glad they never ran into Hank Hill, because I think there'd be some weird Mr. Anderson time cop thing happening there.
Yeah, Tom Anderson is Hank Hill plus 10 years.
The thing about, I think, every animated series I've seen so far, especially primetime ones, is that the first season of every one feels like you're listening to a podcast at 1/2 speed because everybody is just naturally a lot slower. It's lower energy. A lot of this first season, the joke is that the characters are low energy. It's about a very mundane world, but I feel like eventually over time, they had to talk a lot faster to tell bigger stories and to fit more content into the episodes, especially Dale. Like, Dale talks so slow in these, and then later he talks so fast. I think Dale's voice is sort of like early Homer in this. It took until maybe season 3 to get Dale up to speed.
Though it's weird to me, though, because then it sounds like Johnny Hardwick. Johnny Hardwick has this amazing announcer voice he does too, and that voice and Dale used to be farther apart, but Dale slowly moved closer to that guy.
Dale's more like up here now, but in the beginning he's like, I'm Dale Gribble.
You can go now. I love his. This is the meanest Dale Gribble in this. The realist. This episode, they soften him from this point onward.
I think Hank is a lot meaner. He's not as quick to snap. I mean, a lot of the jokes in this episode are about people seeing Hank angry out of context, but they would soften Hank a lot too, including his design. Like, he has got way too many lines on his face in this first season. They really clean him up in the second season and beyond.
And there's an interesting dichotomy of the show too, politically, I think, because there's definitely a Texas conservatism to the show, though. I mean, Mike Judge would see himself as more of a centrist, a libertarian type dude, I think he is a funny, intelligent guy. I'll have some stuff a little bit later about him that I'm going to share. But Mike Judge also is tempered by having all these wussy ass twig boy writers around him, all out of Harvard, like Greg Daniels and Jonathan Collier, that I think temper that a bit and give it more nuance.
This episode has a format that I think they would do better with later, and it is very sort of one note. I love this episode, though, but it's very Mike Judge in that a know-nothing, effeminate, liberal city boy comes to Texas or Arlen and doesn't know anything about the quote unquote real world. And Hank is right, ultimately. I
Yeah.
think they would do a lot more. So no matter who was watching it, no matter which side they took, they could get something out of it. I'm not pro-centrism, by the way, but it's a very careful game to play to not make Hank right, but to make him right enough to be sympathetic.
And on the DVD extras I was just watching today about the making of, like, Greg Daniels was very clear. These were thoughts I wrote down as watching it, but then in the extras, Greg Daniels is very clear that, like, he created characters like Dale Gribble or Cotton to show the real rightward extremes and the more conservative people in Hank's life to then make Hank seem more centered.
That makes a lot of sense.
Like there's an intentionality to that to soften Hank's very prudishness to not make it seem like he's a hateful man. I will say now, one thing that makes me like King of the Hill less in these political times, and I'm an SJW ruining King of the Hill, but there is something to it that it's like this episode's stance especially is, oh, you people judge rednecks, but you are actually the judgmental people here, not you, which it is so dismissive of the casual racism and bigotry that it is the heart of many Southern people. And I know this as a native Arkansan, so I'm not just talking shit here, but it feels like it apologizes for it in a way of just like, oh, well, you might think he's some redneck wife beater, but you didn't see that a baseball accidentally hit his wife and all that. Like, in cases in this, Twig Boy is actually correct and he is overzealous. But if you go to a house and see the son and the wife have bruises on their head and they both say it's from a baseball, you do call Child Protective Services. It's maybe not an accident with most of the time.
It's a funny episode, and I don't like the argument. And also, you want to you're on Hank's side, but yeah, in these cases, you don't give the father the benefit of the doubt, the suspected abuser.
Yeah.
There's another episode that I don't like the message of a lot, where it's about the premise is, this drug addict is going to come work at propane. Strickland Propane, and he gets to break all the rules because society lets him, and they're trying to take care of him, and oh boy, and so they all pretend to have ailments in order to get special treatment. It's a bad message. It's a funny episode though, but it's another very libertarian, judgy thing that I think Greg Daniels and all the wussy Harvard boys do a good job of softening.
Yeah, and they eventually create characters that are explicitly for that, like Lucky and his whole clan is to show you look, these are rednecks, these are just Hank and everybody in their neighborhood are just like regular people. And same with Khan too, is they show that Khan makes all these judgments and makes fun of them based on either misinterpretations or intentional misinterpretations, but they're just regular people who are just trying to get by.
Yeah, and I don't feel that is a fair presentation of things to say that the only people here who make the assumptions are the people who are normally judged by society. It is a very defense of establishment thing that I'm not as big a fan of, even though they find funny ways to do it for sure.
It's a good mark of quality in that I can disagree with the show, and I don't like when Hank is super right all the time, and they would get better about that, but I can still find it funny and still like the characters.
Yeah, when Hank works best, it's he does end up usually being right, but he's also open-minded and can change and changes. All the best episodes are about him knee-jerk reacting to something and then learning, okay, this isn't so bad. I should be more open-minded. And there are different kinds of people in the world. But in real life, I don't think that ever happens.
I don't think the Hank Hills in real life have that reaction. No. Well, that's kind of the message of this episode too, by the end, which it feels very Greg Daniels. I don't want to take credit away from Mike Judge if he did write this, but it feels very Greg Daniels to me that the episode is the Mike Judgy kind of message feels like, oh, if we were to do all this PC touchy-feely crap to interact with our kids, then we'd be raising them poorly and they'd become hellraisers.
Yeah.
But then at the end of the episode, Hank realizes perhaps being more open emotionally with my child is a right thing to do. I just need to do it my way. Hank does meet somewhere in the middle with this idea. He's not going to be as horrible as his own father was.
That's really true. When he learns a lesson, it's very much I will do this my own way that I feel comfortable with. I will do this new thing, but in the way that I am comfortable with, for sure.
And you can see, especially in this episode, you can see the parts of Beavis and Butthead kind of repositioned around to work. Bobby and Joseph are Beavis and Butthead.
Yes. By the way, we're Bobby and Hank on this episode.
We are, yes. Hank just is Tom Anderson. They're the same same guy.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, Hank is constantly bedeviled by Van Driesen types who are telling him, no, you need to take care of these kids. You need to listen to these kids when...
I'm honestly surprised Mike Judge did not voice that character.
Yes, yeah. Well,
Although he would in The Good Family. There'd be another version of that guy.
that probably should have just been Dave Herman.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, but instead they find Dave Herman on the show, who goes on, like, he was an original cast member on Mad TV, and he goes on to become a superstar voice actor in like all the shows that we love. Like, that guy has some of the most amazing range of anybody in the industry, I think.
Dave Herman is the fucking greatest. Like, and Twig Boy looks so much like Michael Bolton from Office Space as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah, he's also in that. So he's like a longtime Judge guy, and he also ends up he's one of those guys, like, he's always like the fifth guy that doesn't get mentioned when you're like, oh, I love the Futurama voice cast, Billy West, like, you name all the guys, but no one ever says Dave Herman when he's like every other character that's not one of those main 5 people.
That's right. The entire cast of King of the Hill's 4 main characters is in Office Space, except for Johnny Hardwick. I don't think who he is in Office Space.
No,
or maybe he's like in the background somewhere. But Mike Judge, Stephen Root, and Dave Herman all in Office Space playing characters. Although Mike Judge is probably not credited, I think.
I think this too is like the greatest. This is one of the best casts in voice acting casts in TV history, I think. Like, everybody is so good.
I mean, Kathy and Jimmy broke out in Sister Act, of course, but who knew she'd be so great of a voice actor, especially when they give Peggy a lot more energy and give her a very interesting character, especially for a mom on TV.
Yeah, she's cast as a totally different character than she would become.
And that Stephen Root, who I mainly knew from playing Jimmy James, a kind of one note but hilarious Mr. Burns type character on news radio, he then can be a million different guys on the show and is so in touch with just the pure abject sadness of Bill Dauterive's life.
He doesn't get a chance to be very sad in this episode, but I've actually been trying to figure out like what Peggy is supposed to be before she becomes who she is, and I think her character early on is she is naive but in a different way than Hank, and that she has a lot of conventional wisdom she gets through popular media. She would say, I heard from this book or I heard from this TV show, so she buys everything at face value, but later she would claim to have invented that knowledge. I think that's where the turn came. Like, in my opinion,
with Fox News. That's
exactly
what she
one other thing I wanted to say about the show too that I like is that I do like when they cast politically. I like when they cast Hank against oppressive conservative forces in his life. Like Hank, even in this episode, hates Megalomart. He hates it. He knows that Megalomart is destroying him, even though the Republican Party loves Walmart and big box stores and he's voting for them. But he knows they're destroying the world. And the show doesn't like Strickland and Strickland Propane, even though Hank loves it more than his father.
In the second season finale, he organizes a walkout when he's forced to work at Megalomart. So Hank is a big union guy.
That's one of the most fun parts where they can point Hank in the direction of the forces actually destroying his life that are not overreaching governmental bodies like Twig Boy in this episode. All right, why don't we get into the episode then? So let it be known, the first line of the entire series is said by Bill.
Yep. Yep.
Yep.
You know what it could be. That damn starter motor. You getting good compression?
Yeah.
I know what's wrong with it. It's a Ford. You know what they say Ford stands for, don't you? It stands for fix it again, Tony.
You're thinking of a Fiat, Dale.
Fix it again.
I'll tell you what you do. You just take them dang old spark plugs out, then that little hole, you just put a little oil around there, just like Bobby says, it's like it'd go boom, boom, just like that.
Well, I wish it were that simple, Boomhauer. But I'll tell you what my truck really needs. Leadership. Detroit hadn't felt any real pride since George Bush went to Japan and vomited on their auto executives. Who's ready?
Y'all catch a Seinfeld show last night?
Yep. Oh, hell, I missed it.
I'll tell you what, you see that part where old George come in there and talk about tasting his own bourbon. Kramer comes sliding in. Just you know, dude, I tell you what, man, them dang old New York boys, just a show about nothing.
I love Boomhauer as sort of an R2-D2 character in that the other characters can understand, and I love all the reactions to what Boomhauer says and that they can understand him and react. And it's funny that, again, this feels like a podcast at half speed. I'm getting kind of impatient with these beats between dialogue.
I had to keep it all in so people can feel the real pace of that there.
But you can actually make out what Boomhauer is saying, which feels odd to me. Like, no, it's got to be so fast that you can only make out a few words. But I don't know if we brought this up in that history. I haven't listened to it for a while, but he's actually based on a guy who would call in and complain about Beavis and Butthead.
Yes.
Yeah.
My family is technically from the South. My family's from Maryland and Virginia. So they never like really connected with The Simpsons. Like my grandparents and my parents never really like connected with The Simpsons or a lot of other shows I would watch. But this show they connected with. And I think that scene is like why? Because they were like, oh, that's us. That like people saw themselves in this show, and everyone would always mention Boomhauer when I was a kid. When I would talk about watching King of the Hill, every adult would be like, oh, I love that Boomhauer guy, and do an impression of him.
One of my favorite responses to Boomhauer is in Dogdale Afternoon, one of my favorite episodes, in which Dale is assumed to be a sniper, and people are trying to talk to him with the police radio, and Boomhauer gets on it, he does his babble, and Dale's like, you've obviously been coached.
I was just thinking of that one,
Yeah.
but also usually it's Hank, but once in a while they throw it to someone else. And then the episode where Boomhauer goes to his grandmother to get her wedding ring.
I love that.
Where they flip it, where he does it to his grandmother, where he doesn't understand what she's saying, and then she puts her dentures in, it says the same thing again.
Yeah, love that.
And Brad Pitt is his brother, Patch Boomhauer.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yes.
Great job, too. Man, the guests they get on this show that are like often big celebrities, to the point that when it's not a big celebrity, you're like, could they just not get someone? Why is Dave Herman a new character? All the celebrity guests like Drew Carey, Kathleen Turner, Johnny Depp, Brad Pitt, they're all really good in the one or two. Michael Keaton, they all do such a great job in the one or two episodes they're usually in.
Yeah, no, they attracted a lot of really cool guests. It became the cool thing to do, and
Chris Elliott would be a recurring character on the show too.
Yes, yeah.
He's a couple characters.
I think this opening 100% has the feel of a Mike Judge short, like a Beavis and Butthead Mike Judge short, from the pacing to a mostly static shot of just the four guys.
It feels like it could have existed as a standalone short. You're totally right about that.
Which I wonder if that is how, well, he sort of had been thinking about it the whole time. He drew a drawing of those. The show started with a drawing of those four guys, not the family.
And then the pitch was, oh, Mr. Batoyan, the Hank Hill pitch to that guy who canceled the critic.
But yeah, just them staring at a pickup truck and drinking beer, and that just the indulgence of, they all drink their beers, they are silent for a few seconds, and they actually just show Hank walk off screen to get more beer and then hand them to everybody.
It's never that slow again, to be fair, but the yup, that is the slowest one of those, and that is like a recurring sort of like refrain in the show.
I love
it's
how
a real
slow
place
it is.
setting. It's a real like, this is as slow as we'll ever get to make you feel better about how slow it is later.
Yeah.
Well, and also if you just came from The Simpsons, here's how the show is. Like, are you on board or not? Because this is how slow we're going in Texas.
You go from Good Morning Starshine to this.
And that Fiat joke also is about as racist as Dale gets, because there's a fear of foreign cars, which I think that still exists now. But
Ford stands for Fix or Repair Daily.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I guess Tony in that is the implied mechanic, is named Tony.
Yeah,
I
for an
suppose.
Italian car.
Yeah, but the apparently in 2014, Fiat actually did their own ad campaign that traded on the "Fix It Again, Tony" label.
Was Tony a hunk?
Well, I think he was, but the real message of it was that the "Fix It Again" is fixing a lesser car and turning it into a Fiat.
They're taking it back.
That's how they're owning the narrative on it. Yeah, take it back, as one of the shows would say. And though, it should be noted too that it was not, as we said in Two Bad Neighbors, H.W. Bush does not vomit on Japanese car executives. It was politicians he was vomiting on.
Records from that era are spotty at best.
Well, and that's how Hank wants to remember it, because he's like, finally some Republican took it upon themselves to get back at the Japanese.
He weaponized his vomit against the car executives.
Well,
but I always think of the SNL sketch of just repeatedly playing Dana Carvey throwing up.
that was pretty good. Though I am sensitive to vomit jokes a bit much, but I do think it's a real good. It does capture that these guys don't like foreign cars, and it is a kind of just light jingoism, that the kind that is appealed to in Trumpism as well, but it just gets more loudspeakery in that way. It also feels like a very metatextual moment of saying a show about nothing, because that's what they're saying about this show. This is a show about nothing.
Can you believe you're watching four guys stand around and look at a car? This is actually a show about nothing. Also, Seinfeld was never a show about nothing. I hate when people say that.
Tons of shit happens.
Yeah. Too many things happen in that show. There's so many plots.
Well, I think that shows you how effective they were as writers on Seinfeld, that within the show, they called the show a show about nothing. And so everybody's like, well, I guess that's what the show is. Like, no, it's the show with 18 subplots. That's what the show is. And then we get the great theme song.
By the Refreshments, who broke up right after this. They were poised to be big country rock superstars. Wow. And I think they do a little more music later in this season. I think the montage in this episode is their music.
I believe so.
Where Bobby's acting out. But yeah, they broke up right after this.
The music is great, and it really does set the tone, and it makes it like this is an America that doesn't get cartoon shows made about them. And, it's the banality of suburban existence is just so well captured here.
I don't know about you guys, but I never skip the opening. It puts me in a really good mood every time I see it. And it's so short, but it's just such a great little ditty that really evokes the tone of the show.
Yeah, and it's quick enough. And they reorchestrate it later, and they add some layers to it, like the bell and stuff.
The bell comes in.
Is that not recorded by the Refreshments?
The bell signifies the season finale. When there's a bell and like hooting, that's the season finale version of the song.
Okay.
Yeah.
The intro too, it just so puts you in the world of it, of just showing that like here are these slow guys and the world goes all around them, and they just keep on living. And also that you see like Hank gets in an American Gothic pose with his very lame family.
I knew I recognized that before, but only upon thinking about this for a podcast, I'm like, oh yeah, that's an American Gothic joke. I've seen it a billion times, and it just washed right over me. Yeah.
And the world
does it bother you when the camera spins around his head and it settles onto it being a logo? His T-shirt turns into the like blue shirt that he wears to work to give him a collar.
It is his blue work shirt. It's true.
He kind of morphs like black or white Michael Jackson video style into a work shirt.
He does it. It's weird because it's clearly because like they didn't like how just the head floating in that circle looked, so they needed to give it a little bit of form down there. But it's odd to me that it changes in the intro.
I just like when he blinks. At the dun dun, he blinks.
So then we're right back from the opening. We get a truly iconic moment in King of the Hill in the first episode. Like, that's something too. In the first season of Simpsons, if we're comparing the two, is there really a scene that gets memed all that much now or that memorable from the first 13 episodes of Simpsons? Anything on the level of toilet
It's
sounds.
all toilet sound. Yeah. Also, setting up very early, just like all the Harvard writers on the show, Bobby is a femi comedy nerd who loves weird comedy stuff. And it happens like, I forgot that it was baked into the show this early. I'm sure all the Harvard guys grew up being this little fail son.
Yeah. Greg Daniels was this guy probably telling in the extras, Greg Daniels talks about how his dad was a guy from rural Massachusetts who was raising these kids in urban New York. And he probably, for him, it was his son probably talking about like Bob Newhart records or something. That
or
make
Spike
no
Jones
sense.
or something.
Yeah, or Spike Jones.
Alan Sherman.
Yeah, later on, Bobby does the sound effects thing from Police Academy, which is basically, later on, he'd be doing it just like a lot louder and probably for longer.
But yes, here's our first appearance of Bobby and Luann.
What you listening to, son?
I don't think you like it.
Well, why not? I like this new generation of music.
Hello?
Mother of God, it's all toilet sounds. Where did you record this?
I bought it at the mall. It's the funny phone jerks.
Let me tell you, Bobby, there's nothing funny about these sounds. What that person on your tape has is a medical disorder. Now you get ready for the game, okay?
Yes, sir.
that boy ain't right.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, God! Luann, I thought you went home.
Nah, Uncle Hank. Mom and Daddy are still fighting.
Well, you're welcome to stay, but for God's sakes, girl, lock the door. I've got a minor son living in this house.
My favorite jokes in the show are the ones about Hank being naive, and I just love how he takes this Jerky Boys parody at face value. He's like, this is a serious medical condition.
And that he thinks his son recorded it because no person could sell this. That would be illegal.
And also how crude their parody of the Jerky Boys is. It's just someone picking up the phone and a fart noise.
Just this confused old lady and then an immediate fart. Like,
for as racist and not funny as the Jerky Boys were, there were at least characters.
Yes.
Like the Egyptian magician.
Oh, yes.
Luann is a little different, too. She's the only one who actually talks faster than she would later.
Yeah.
Because they just kind of dumbify her over time. But she also is she's kind of a gearhead in this episode. Like, she fixes a part of Hank's truck.
I feel
like later on, if she touched his truck without his permission, he would lose his mind.
I really like that about her in that there's like a through line with the truck throughout the entire episode, and she is the one who fixes it at the end, and she immediately knows what the problem is. But throughout the entire episode, they're all looking at the truck. Everyone's tinkering with the truck, but Luann is the one who actually fixes it.
It gives you a real worth to Luann that's easy to underestimate because she is, at face value in this scene, she's supposed to represent the real redneck white trash that Hank isn't. And especially her talking about the trailer park and mama and daddy fighting. Like, it's a very hick thing. And it's to show you that Hank isn't that. And it's also is a very telling character moment for Hank that, other characters on a show, they would have been like, ooh, a sexy girl in her, but this young woman in her towel disgusts Hank, or he's just like, it's so improper, he has to turn away, he can't even look at her bare shoulders.
Even if it wasn't a relative, he is repulsed by sexuality.
Oh, very much
outside of Peggy.
Oh, yes, yeah. And
I also feel like, speaking of her touching the truck, in this episode, 2 people touched the truck without permission, which I feel like later would not happen because especially the other guys are like terrified of Hank sometimes.
They do run away every time they mess with the truck and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Hank in his truck is one of my favorite episodes. The one where his truck is dying.
Yeah.
He keeps crying.
That is one of the there's multiple moments in the show that actually make it harder for me to watch because they remind me too much of, I was definitely Bobby and my dad was Hank Hill, except he didn't love me. But the bit.
Sorry to laugh at your pain, Henry.
But no, that was a joke. But anyway, when they go to that movie, and the father only starts crying seeing this movie and never shows emotions otherwise. Like, that was so real to me. And especially the mother saying like, well, no, this is about your relationship with your son. And he's just like, no, it isn't. It's about me and my truck.
You see, I poked myself with a straw. If we do Talking of the Hill, the miniseries for the Patreon, we have to do that episode. It's one of my favorites too.
Yeah, I think that should be there.
Episode is a great example of like what an amazing voice actor Mike Judge is, because he does these sort of cartoonish voices that are like imitations of these broad generalizations of types of people, but like bring such heart to them, and you believe it, that like when Hank is crying and he's literally going boo, like you feel it. It feels like he's really crying even though he's making the silliest sounds.
Yeah, I mean, the speech at the end of this episode is great. I feel like there's some ad-libs in there too, because for the Beavis and Butthead music video segments, he would be doing a lot of ad-libs in the booth and being like fed lines by writers, but he's good at ad-libbing.
He's an amazing voice actor. Yeah, I mean, too, the Bobby stuff in this is just so easy to identify with. When I was a heavy-set kid of a father who wanted me to be a little league playing kid, who
also named Hank.
Also named Tank, yes. Oh boy, and I especially identified with just that line there where Bobby's just enjoying his stupid comedy thing. But he knows his dad won't like it. And then when his dad's like, now it's time to put away your dumb comedy thing and go play baseball. And just Bobby's like, all right. Like, he doesn't, the last thing in the world he wants to do is be active. So then we get the first scene with Peggy, which, I think you're right. She is not fully formed. The Peggy here is definitely a more coddling mother who like is very comforting and understanding to Bobby. To Hank's chagrin a lot of the time.
I think the jokes here are, and for the first season, are mainly, look how Peggy raises Bobby. It's very different than Hank, and Hank is worried about Peggy feminizing Bobby.
Mm-hmm. A very real father fear. But here's Peggy's first scene.
So you ready to kick some wildcat butt, Bobby?
Okay. Nah, don't you worry, son. You just do your best.
Don't listen to her, Bobby. If you want to win, you're going to have to do better than your best.
How do I do that?
You got to give 110%. That's what'll give you that winning edge.
But what if the Wildcats give 110% too?
Well, then you got to try even harder.
How about if Bobby gave 112%?
Sure, that'd work.
Or maybe 113?
Yeah, that's even better.
No, I don't know. 13 is a very unlucky number.
Look, we're not talking about 13. We're talking about 113, and even... Okay, give 112. What's the difference?
I punched up Peggy's joke a little bit to be modern Peggy, and I think she would have been saying, so the original line is, I don't know, 13 is a very unlucky number. I think a modern Peggy would be like, I have heard that 13 is a very unlucky number, or in my opinion, 13 is like, I feel like that is what the modern Peggy would be. That's the only thing that's missing in this episode for me, is that I love modern Peggy. She's like one of my favorite characters on a TV show. So I just want her to be a little more self-centered and a little more... the speed I want her to be.
Greg Daniels on the commentary for the episode mentions that the animators make her look better every season, and he kind of likes how just plain, and because Hank's a plain guy, he should have a plain wife, and it makes it even funnier when Hank talks about how pretty he thinks she is, and everybody's like, yeah.
He compares her to a truck.
The design documents for the characters are really interesting, and Peggy's, it specifically points out, like, this is the good posture, this is the bad posture, keep the bad posture. And it shows in the doc, like, this is how easy it is to make her look pretty. Don't make her look pretty. Make her look normal.
Which is just, it's not about, it could be so dangerous to veer into, like, you're making fun of a woman's looks and that's shitty, but it is that everybody in this world is plain, that even Dale's wife is supposed to be hot, but even she isn't a particularly super attractive woman. Like, and same with...
She's like middle-aged weather lady hot.
Yeah, exactly. John Redcord, now that's a foxy man.
He's a big slice of man.
But
I love the reveal of Joseph in this episode. It's so funny and well done. It's such a joke that's so tired, but they get mileage out of it for 14 years. And the way it's introduced is just so funny, because it's like... You get the joke, oh, she's cheating on him. And then there's like a full minute before he's like, Joseph, come in here. And then Joseph comes in and looks like John Redcorn.
Yeah, just the reveal, like, hi, Dad. And like walking in, you forget it was just a huge gut laugh. And then they have to commit to that character in the aftermath of that joke. Okay, so we made the joke. Now he is a character who exists in this world.
So now we get, Hank is correct that 113 is a different number than 13. I like that point there, but I can so identify with Bobby. Bobby is a clever-ish kid who is just trying to get out of doing physical activity. He simply doesn't want to play baseball. So anytime his dad's like, well, you have to play baseball, he's like, but what if I didn't? Like, no, you have to. And like this bit here, the lawyer ball joke is one of my favorites of the whole episode.
Bobby, you can't make an omelet without breaking eggs, and you can't get on base without taking a swing.
The pitcher could walk me, couldn't he?
Don't play lawyer ball, son. Now you hit the next one out of the park. Run! 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 Look at the batter, boy. Watch the ball.
Huh? What?
Hey, don't look at me. Keep your eye on the ball.
Keep my eye on the what?
Stop looking at me, boy. Watch the ball.
Can't hear you, Dad.
If you were watching Fox in early 1997. You've seen that clip 1.5 billion times. I think they only showed all the physical humor bits in this episode to advertise it, like Hank falling in the truck, Bobby being hit with the ball. It was the real, man fall down funny show for Fox.
People are really going to tune into that. It's a real ow my balls, actually, if we're going to talk Mike Judge stuff. Him getting hit in the face with the ball is very funny, like active too. And I like Hank just shaking his head at Peggy is right. I agree with Peggy cheering on her son, even if he doesn't take a swing at the bat. But the way Hank just goes like, he's mad that she's encouraging him no matter what. He's like, no, I only want to encourage him to do the good things that I want him to do instead of blanket approval, which I do feel like that is an opinion of Mike Judge too, that children don't need blanket approval on everything. I do think Judge and Daniels too were way ahead of the curve of making fun of big box retailers. Like,
yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure, obviously, I was a teenager at this time. I was not reading a lot of leftist critiques of capitalism, but this is one of the first times I noticed, like, oh, big corporations are bad. It was in King of the Hill. And by the way, Megalomart is probably the best, like, name joke, name joke. It is so subtle that it just hits me every time. Like, oh yeah, Megalomart, like megalomaniacal.
Yes, yeah.
It's almost too much of a joke, because I think about that because, when you listen to the Simpsons commentators or whatever, they talk about how they would agonize over every single name you'd see in a thing, or Bob's Burgers even more so, or Bob's Burgers, like every name of every business is a joke. And on King of the Hill, when you see a business in the background or they go to one, it's either a real Texas thing like Gene's West, or it's like goes so far out of its way to not be a joke that you feel like you wasted your time looking at it.
And I like that there's no villain of Megalomart, just a giant corporate presence that's in everyone's life.
It just exists and does these things. Yeah, and that this is the show being way ahead of most of the Hollywood writers of things, recognizing that Walmart is the center of an American town or a Target. Like, that's, if you lived in a suburban southern town, like, that's, what else were you going to do? It's open 24 hours. All other commerce has been killed by this thing. So here it is. And when they stop there, Hank hates it. From minute one, he hates that place. And it's so great. And that also that in the scene here I'm about to play, you get to see Buckley for the first time, even though you don't know it's Buckley.
I love that they killed Buckley when they realized, like, we can't do anything else with Buckley. He is just a bad, like, he is your first bad teenage boyfriend, which I'm surprised there are no women writers on the staff because I feel like it's very observational.
Oh, there was Cheryl.
Cheryl Holiday, yeah.
And do you remember, like, the summer where they tried to do Who Shot Mr. Burns again, but with what turned out to be Buckley?
Yeah.
There were a ton of great two-parters with King of the Hill, two-parter cliffhangers. I think just two, but then they did the Japan thing too.
Yeah. No, the Megalo...
this one, they did a, like, when you would buy TV Guide, you'd get a trading card of each of the characters and guess who would die when they came back for the next season.
It would have been funny if they had killed Chuck Mangione. That would have been in their world. Chuck
was
Mangione.
One of them, yeah.
If he had exploded in the world of King of the Hill, that would have been. There was who exploded, who shot that Strickland's girlfriend,
Debbie Grund,
and also the did Peggy just die?
The skydiving
in
one.
Skydiving,
yeah. A lot of great two-parters. So Greg Daniels made Parks and Rec, right? When I was watching the first season, I was like, Chris Pratt's character is Buckley 10 years later. The first version of the character who was not lovable, who's like the shittiest boyfriend who plays Rock Band after you fall in a hole.
That's so true.
Yeah.
That was the turn. They stick with all these characters basically unchanged for King of the Hill, but in Parks and Rec, they're like, this meanness and badness doesn't work as much for Parks and Rec. So instead, they turn the other way that just about everybody's really good at their jobs, and it's just a company of equals, which it was nice, but it's also a very Obama era thing that I have trouble going back to now.
Yeah, it's a little rough now.
Yeah.
Also, did you notice when Hank parks at Megalomart, he doesn't park in a parking space?
Oh, no, I didn't notice that.
I didn't notice either.
He's like in a non-space. He just parks like, it's like they just drew the background and didn't draw an extra space for him to stay in.
Okay. So it's an animation error, not a joke.
Are we to imagine this is some magic parking space? But yes, here's the Megalomart.
I hate this place. Excuse me, where's the hardware department?
Where is the hardware department? What exactly is it you're looking for?
The hardware department.
Yeah, but are you looking for like a tool or something?
What difference does it make?
Huh. What difference does it make?
Okay, I'm looking for a tap and die and some WD-40.
Huh. Well, What is it that you're trying to do?
I'm trying to buy a tap and die and some WD-40 and get out of this godforsaken store.
And what is a tap and die?
Okay, forget it. Let's say I want a hammer. Do you know what a hammer is? That's what I want, a damned hammer. Now where in the hell would I go?
Hey, that's that Hank Hill fella that lives on the block next to us.
He sure has a temper, doesn't he?
Sure does. Makes you wonder who gave his boy that black eye.
You're gonna have to pay for that, dude.
You're fired!
By the way, a tap and die, that's a tool used to create screw threads.
Yes, I had to look
I didn't
that
know that
up.
either. I do like, so The Simpsons did a lot of dumb teenagers working at jobs and they're in over their heads. But I think the commentary here and with Megalomart is that these giant corporations just hire dumb teenagers they pay nothing, who don't have to know anything, and you can never yell at the right person because it's just a poor child thrown into a giant store.
Hank is directing his anger at the wrong person here. Like Buckley is frustrating in this case, but he's not mad at the things that create a Buckley or put Buckley in this position. Though, I mean, the questions Buckley is made to ask are so great too, because it's more frustrating than just a squeaky voiced teen who is dumb. It's also his questions to Hank are framed as like, no, you're wrong.
Yeah.
Do you think, what are you looking for? If you think you need the hardware section, it could be in a different section, so you need to tell me what you're looking for. It's like, no, I know where this is, not you. That is the frustration Hank is feeling at that moment. It's so very specific and great, and just his, a hammer. Like he's got
Do you know what a hammer is?
And unlike Buckley, those gossiping ladies never really came back.
And like two of them are voiced by Kathy and Jimmy that we see.
It's very distracting. It's just Kathy and Jimmy, Pamela Adlon, and Joan something, the woman who does
Nancy.
Nancy. Yeah. So then we cut to Twig Boy. This is another like, are we to expect this is some kind of magic?
Twig Boy?
Well, no, it's called Arlen County on there when it is Heimlich County.
Right.
So yeah, it's just, they hadn't figured out Heimlich yet.
I wish they would have named this character. Did they name him at all?
It's Anthony.
Anthony. Oh, you're right. It doesn't come up that often.
He would come back a couple times, but basically he would come back in two other episodes, one where he doesn't even remember Hank and he's used weirdly. But I think too, it's odd that like, so they have him as Twig Boy, but they also have Useless, which he kind of just inherits all the Twig Boy jokes, except he's a Texas native.
Yeah, and he's just the sad liberal dad with the droopy mustache.
Yes,
They eventually stopped using him completely.
I love how mean they are to Useless. It lets you know that they're, and I mean Eustace, but it lets you know that you're watching guys who were the bullies in high school. They are bad people, or they used to be bad people.
I do like the double carpal tunnel syndrome bracelets on that guy. Yeah.
Just his wussy. What you are really supposed to hate Anthony.
It's a little too extreme. Like, I mean, I get it. He sucks. But the one joke I think is too on the nose is like, thanks for the latte, Kenneth. That's the joke that he drinks a latte. It's just like, come on.
She doesn't drink those now.
They're delicious.
More than any stereotyped redneck, it does feel almost like a response to when you see the stereotypical redneck on these other shows that don't take place in Texas.
Yeah,
he is the inverse of that, of the hyper stereotypical touchy PC liberal from Los Angeles. and I think too in Twig Boy there is a bit of the anti-government sentiment too, that he is an overreaching, over-controlling bureaucrat inserting himself into regular people's lives, which I feel like social workers have no free time to do anything that Anthony does.
Yeah.
And it is very much the inverse in reality of what people imagine a Twig Boy does in real life.
At the same time, though, his boss is like a good old boy. So they're not trying to say, all social workers are bad, just this guy who's overreaching.
The good old boy's the good guy.
He gives the dad a chance,
Yes.
And Hank really takes to calling him Twig Boy and calls him that a lot and never calls anyone else that again. But Cotton does call somebody that in a much later episode. And I wonder if that's like, I don't think it's an intentional callback, but I wonder if some writer was like, oh, maybe we'll throw that in there to say that he got it from him or something.
And so then we cut back and we got a little Dale in the opening, but now it's time for Dale's to really find out what makes Dale tick.
Hey, I know what's wrong with your truck. It's your quote-unquote pollution controls. I heard on talk radio you don't even need them. They're just an egghead government plot.
How is cutting down on pollution a government plot, Dale?
Open up your eyes, man. They're trying to control global warming. Get it? Global.
So what?
That's code for UN commissars telling Americans what temperature it's going to be in our outdoors. I'll say, let the world warm up. See what Boutros golly thinks about that. We'll grow oranges in Alaska.
Dale, you giblet head. We live in Texas. It's already 110 in the summer, and if it gets 1 degree hotter, I'm going to kick your ass.
That's how much the window is shifted that a conservative TV character not only believes in global warming, but wants to beat up people who are spreading lies about it.
Yes, yeah. That is to show that Hank isn't that guy.
Yeah.
It's like, see, Hank's not as bad as this guy. And this is a real window into what it was then, the talk radio Fox News InfoWars viewer.
And I bet Dale was listening to Alex Jones when he was in Texas at this time, right?
Yeah, which they're making fun of talk radio, and oh, wait, what's this on my computer here?
Hello, this is Hank Hill, and I'm telling you what, you need to listen to Alex Jones.
Yeah. Infowars.com.
My judge, what is the secret of the universe?
What?
Yes, Mike Judge in 2013 did an interview on InfoWars, which it's easy to say that 5 years ago people didn't know as much about InfoWars, but I have to wonder at Mike Judge choosing to do a thing with on InfoWars.
I forgot about that. I mean, recently I heard that Mike Judge was liking Ben Shapiro tweets, and I was like, I don't want to know anything more. I will choose not to investigate this.
Let's not dig any
I was not aware
deeper.
of this at all. I just know about him working with John Kay.
Yeah, they have a weird boy. Yep. It's not cool that Hank Hill and George Licker have existed together in the same world.
Yeah.
Talking about UFC.
Yeah.
Oh God.
There's like a weird if you like UFC, it's cool, but there's a weird like libertarian kook crossover between UFC people and that side. Like, what's going on there? I'm making Venn diagrams with my fingers here.
I, as the biggest UFC fan on the people around on this podcast, I don't really know. I mean, it definitely is a more separate from corporate fighting because it's just one guy, and so it lets specific types of dudes show up. It also is about being like the complete man. If you're the complete fighter, who's the ultimate fighter, I guess it has kind of a libertarian determinism to it too. And there are definitely some very conservative figures in it, but there also are there are some hardcore lefties in the UFC as well, like to the left of Obama and tons of stuff too. But Joe Rogan is still the voice of the UFC too. Jeez. That is very real.
I call him Pink Shrek. He looks like a pink Shrek.
Well, it's not. I hope you're not saying he would do anything that would change his appearance over time.
Of course not.
No. But yeah, so I did think that was an interesting extra dimension too. Dale is a joke here. Being a talk radio kook is a joke, and you're supposed to laugh at him. But when I see that Mike Judge did InfoWars in 2013, when you should definitely know who Alex Jones is then.
I wanted Butthead to weigh in, like, he's stupid.
But instead, you get that, and he did a full interview, so if you really want to watch a full interview on from InfoWars with Mike Judge, it's out there. But, so it just felt weird to me, so you're making fun of Dale Gribble for being a talk radio guy, but Mike Judge kind of knows this world more than you'd think.
I'd like to think that he was more of a fan of Alex when he was just sort of the conspiracy kook back when government conspiracies were more fun.
He was an Art Bell type at a time, but then unfortunately that's the real problem with laughing at Alex Jones after Obama's out of the White House, because then he has to love the government, and so it's just like, it's just more boring, I suppose. He always sucked, I don't want to say that, but this takes me back to when people were afraid of the UN having any power and hatred. Like, do people even know who the Secretary General of the UN is right now? I had to look it up. Anthony Guergos or something. I can't even remember his name.
Boutros Ghali was a memorable name that came up a lot on Murphy Brown.
That is true. That's just it's a funny name like John Sununu. Who knows? You don't need to know politics to know comedy.
Stephanopoulos.
At the time, it was definitely a fear of the UN was going to regulate Christianity away and all this stuff.
That came up in Snowflake Down. What a cartoon for Clone High.
But the UN has no power. It can't do shit. Like it couldn't prevent the Iraq War. So what the fuck good is it? Like that's the whole point of the UN. The UN can't sanction let's say, apartheid states in the Middle East that we support as well.
Not naming any particular ones.
Yeah. So what can the UN even do? Why would you be mad? But climate change denial is as real now as it ever was among the Dale types. So after we get that scene, goes to Bobby throwing his baseball against the wall, making dents in the wall, just like
some real damage going on to that drywall,
with just an empty look on his face.
Yeah.
On the commentary, Greg Daniels says that Bobby is so slow in this compared to later, and that his catchphrase in the first season was, okay.
Yeah, that is true.
But
he definitely holds on to that. I like the okay because, like, as Bobby gets more, like, wilder and louder and higher pitched, I feel like she always holds on to that as the like centering of Bobby. Where later on, like seasons later, you still like will hear like if they tell Bobby to do anything, he just goes okay, and then goes and does it. And I laugh at it every single time, especially when it's like because it means someone tells him to do something and he's a kid, so he has to, and he goes to do it. Or if somebody says something stupid that he just has to listen to because he's a child, he'll say that. Like there are times when Peggy says something completely stupid and he just says, okay, like just accept, because it's his just, I have to accept this and move on without questioning it.
And I also like Peggy's reaction to daytime TV is them kind of showing the gullibility of her. Like,
oh, that poor man.
That poor man. And though that watching TV, having a silly reality TV moment like that is so Beavis and Butthead.
Yeah.
Like, that's exactly the show Beavis and Butthead would see on their TV. If only there was a Bryant Gumbel joke, then it would be more complete.
Couldn't be better.
Mike Judge, one thing he's really good at, to get back to complimenting him, is screaming in pain.
Yeah.
I love it. So you'll hear a bit of it in this clip here.
Blah.
Hello, I'm a social worker with the state. Would you mind if I talk to you for a minute?
Well, sure, come on in.
Damn it, there it is again. Where is that thumping coming from? It's driving me crazy.
Could be far off helicopters. UN helicopters.
Dale, what are you doing? Give me some light. Now I can't see. Ah, my arm. Ah, my head. Ow. Ow. God.
Mrs. Hill, would you say your husband has a bad temper?
Who, Hank? No, Hank is as gentle as a lamb.
No more bouncing that ball.
Hank, we have a visitor.
I feel like Hank shouts more in this episode than he does in the entire series combined. The rest of the entire series.
And just the sad look on his face is really good. Just Greg Daniels also comments on it that there's a lot more lines on Hank's face in this than you get in any other episode, especially the lines under his eyes. Those got moved away.
One of the recurring jokes we missed is Hank saying, "I'm going to kick your ass,"
which
is a minor Hank line he uses a lot. I'll kick your ass.
His kick your ass is how Hank keeps them in line. As we'll see later in this episode, they already established that, like, if the other three guys don't have Hank around, they will it's chaos immediately. It all falls apart.
Hank is their leader.
He's getting interviewed by Twig Boy. And just also, I think you need to have Peggy let him into the house because Hank would never have let him in even. It has to be Peggy that does it. And his anger at how much writing comes after the word no is so fucking funny. And also, I was definitely Bobby as the boy listlessly playing his Game Boy in the background. just how blank Bobby's face is. You said it in our What a Cartoon, Bob, but Bobby is a millennial. Like he is the millennial child. It's perfect, really. He's just soft. He just wants to play his Game Boy, and he just has a blank look on his face most of the time.
I think he came from Mike Judge seeing a kid at like the mall or an airport just blankly staring off into space while eating ice cream, like, looking exactly like Bobby.
But so yes, Hank gets a little interview here.
So your assertion, Mr. Hill, is that Bobby got the black eye at his baseball game?
That's not my assertion. That's what happened.
Have you ever hit your son, Mr. Hill?
No. What the heck are you writing? All you gotta write is one word, no.
Mr. Hill, I feel that you're coming from an anger mindset, And if you're projecting this anger onto me, it gives me grave concerns as to how you facilitate your son's growth in private.
Mister, I have not begun to project my anger onto you.
Mrs. Hill, how did you get this here on your forehead?
Oh, this? Well, Bobby threw his baseball.
You threw a baseball at your mother?
Oh, Hank, it was an accident.
So would this be the same baseball that gave Bobby the black eye?
Now, think of yourself as Twig Boy.
Yeah.
It is your job to judge the safety of children in a home. You come here and see this screaming, angry man who almost hits you with a baseball, who has a wife and son with bruises on their face, who's now screaming at you. Twig Boy is not wrong to make these assumptions at the start here. I would have done the same thing.
It feels like Hank relies on baseball-based abuse.
Exactly.
Throwing baseballs at people's heads.
He's just an uncreative abuser who just says, just say it was a baseball too after he hits them. Like that's what the assumption is here. And I feel I would, in the real world, I would want a social worker to make the assumptions Twig Boy is making, at least on surface value. His one flaw comes up later in his investigation, which does show he was making too many assumptions based on Redneck City. But in this scene here, I don't think he's doing it wrong. He's doing his job correctly. So then we had to hear a little bit about Peggy and Hank's glands.
Do you work outside the home, Mrs. Hill?
Well, yes, I do. I'm a substitute Spanish teacher. Los estudiantes son mis amigos.
And you just have the one son?
Uh-huh. Yeah, well, we would have liked to have more kids, but Hank has a narrow urethra.
Peggy?
In fact, Hank's sperm count.
That's enough. What in the hell did you tell him that for?
Well, he asked me.
He asked you how many kids we have. He didn't ask you about my glands.
I love him. I love hearing him say that. There's a funny joke later in that even Dale knows about the narrow urethra, so you get the idea that Peggy tells everyone who wants to know.
Peggy has told everyone a long time ago about his narrow urethra, which...
It's like an interesting fact about Hank, you know?
Yes. I mean, and it just immediately makes you think of him ejaculating, or maybe that's just me. But,
he's only done it once.
Yeah. I just love that, and that the later backstory they will add in is that Lady Bird relaxed him enough to let enough sperm escape his urethra to create Bobby. Oh God. Well, that also shows why he's like it's his only child. It's why he takes so much pride in Bobby.
It's my boy.
It's my boy. Well, that's my boy. And also, like, you do get a little bit of overconfident Peggy in her assertion that she knows Spanish enough to speak it.
Yeah.
And that clearly everyone around her won't correct her on this because they don't want to be mean. So there's so many great episodes out of her Spanish language stuff too. Actually everything in this scene would come back to be like more than one episode.
That's true.
Later.
Like every joke is later the premise of an episode.
At least one. Like when she became a Spanish teacher, she got arrested in Mexico in one episode. I remember.
And there's an entire trial in Spanish where they have to prove that she can't speak Spanish without her knowing. That's what the point of it is.
To not hurt her feelings.
Yeah.
God damn. And same actually with Bobby's Game Boy leads to That's My Purse.
Yeah.
Another classic. Then we get Hank's stump speech here, which is about summing up Hank, but also letting you know what the politics of the show are in general, at least his position.
Loud is not allowed. Now you listen to me, mister. I work for a living. And I mean real work, not writing down gobbledygook. I provide the people of this community with propane and propane accessories. Oh, when I think of all my hard-earned tax dollars going to pay a bunch of little twig boy bureaucrats like you, it just makes me want to... Oh, God, it just...
Hank?
Honey, bring me my BC headache powder and a glass of water.
All right, Hank.
Now you listen here. You see that boy? That's my boy. And if you ever try to take him away, so help me God, I'll tear you a new one bigger than the Grand Canyon. Now I want you to get out of my house. You're not welcome here. I mean now, before I give you a black eye. Get...
They would never go this far again. I feel like this is atonal for the show to have a character give a long speech like this with not music that's not part of the scene, but like a funny song like the Battle Hymn of the Republic, a hilarious song about
with
war.
a record scratch,
with
a very cartoony record scratch.
With a record scratch. But I do like that the social worker is taking notes during the speech.
That's great. Yes.
Yeah, it's a great little joke, but I'm glad they never really went that far again to just sort of break the reality that much.
I think they definitely felt they needed Hank to make a statement of, this is what I'm all about. Like, this is me. And I mean, you can also see a lot of Hank's politics in there too, that he feels like some rather libertarian values of hating government overreach, hating that his tax dollars are paying for a bureaucracy that's torturing him. And also, though, that he defines some work as more valid than others. Like he says, not do real work. Like it is a very unsocialist message of like, well, all labor has value. To Hank, no, what Twig Boy is doing is not valuable labor. It is lesser than his work. And he should be doing real work that real Americans do. And the way he chases him off, though, is pretty funny. Like, just like, now, get out.
Is that our first Ladybird appearance?
Yes, yeah, that is. Which she gets kind of nothing in here.
She's too active in this episode in terms of the one time we see her. She should be asleep somewhere.
Oh, you know, she holds pretty still in her one other scene where she's photographed on the lawnmower.
Oh, you're right. As Hank, cosplaying as Hank. First cosplay in the series.
I also feel like later on, this whole episode wouldn't happen because I feel like Hank screaming at that guy, like the town would rally behind him and join him and also yell at that guy. They wouldn't like assume Hank is being wrong.
Yeah, it would be more forces against him or against Twig Boy, I think. Twig Boy.
A funnier...
And Bobby reenacting this scene is, I think, the funniest I think this episode gets. I laugh so hard at Bobby imitating Hank. And, he's not much, but he's all I got.
I think a better executed version of this kind of a story would happen in an episode called, I think it's called the Texas Skill Saw Massacre, in which Hank accidentally cuts off Dale's finger, and he has to go to anger management classes. So it's about government overreach, not looking at the context of a situation and punishing Hank. But I think everyone is much more sympathetic throughout that episode. It's a better version of this kind of story. It's one of my favorites. One of my favorite episodes as well.
That's a great episode. And the point of the episode is like anger is good, and sometimes people have to be yelled at.
Yeah.
And so then we get maybe the darkest Dale scene ever, just because he's not empathetic in any way.
No.
In this scene, this is a very Dale is a horrible person, not fun, just a dick.
Well, Hank's got a lot of problems. Hey, baby, how about a couple of beers?
Sorry, Shug, gotta go. I got another migraine treatment with John Redcorn.
Nancy, you've been going to that healer for 12 years and you still get headaches every night.
Healing process takes time, honey.
Great song choice.
Getting back to the Hill family, have you ever seen Hank hit his child, Bobby?
Hank? No, sir. Bobby's his pride and joy because of his narrow urethra.
Are you absolutely sure?
100%. You can ask my son. He's Bobby's best friend. Joseph!
What is it, Daddy?
You ever seen Hank hit Bobby?
Nuh-uh, never.
See? Now you can just move along now.
It's a much less whimsical Dale.
Yep.
I think a modern Dale would be in the basement with the show turtles, Mountain Dew. Mountain Dew.
But instead it's like, hey, baby. Like, that's just mean. Like, and that shows you, too, when you see a character do that in front of a stranger, you're like, boy, how does he treat her when a stranger's not
But
there?
he's punished by being cucked.
Oh, yeah. It shows you that he's a huge loser who his wife has not, touched in years.
He got what he deserves, ultimately.
Yes, yeah. And just him smoking in his lazy boy, and also it's so fucking, we already said it, but God, the Joseph joke is so funny because
walking into the frame.
And you set up this guy who is so sure of his worldview, thanks to talk radio, that it's led him to be the stupidest one of them all, like that ignorant of reality.
That's true. Yeah, I love that. I love that that is the joke about Dale. Like, he is sure he knows everything except the fact that his wife is cheating on him for 13 years and his son is not his real son.
Who looks just like the only Native American man in his world.
Yes.
He looks just, goddamn. And yeah, I think there is a bit of like when you soften Dale too much, it makes him a funnier character and it makes for a better show. But I sometimes don't like that it softens your views on a truly bad part of society, which are racist conspiracy theory nuts like this guy, like the type of guy Dale represents. By softening him, it's kind of like you're doing PR for a bad person, which I'm not a fan of that, even though I love Dale, but I'm just saying that's an unfortunate side effect of it.
They never really dealt with racism on the show itself, and I'm kind of glad they didn't. There's one episode I can think of in that Bernie Mac was the co-star, and that Ladybird attacked him.
Oh, yeah.
He was a repairman, so they were worried that Ladybird was racist, but really, Ladybird would only attack repairmen because they were in Hank's domain, and Ladybird could tell how upset they made Hank.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, that was a sweet episode.
He also plays multiple characters. Bernie Mac comes back more than once.
Oh man, I gotta watch some of those later season ones. I need to check that out. But well, speaking of dogs barking though, Boomhauer's got some thoughts on that.
I've been calling y'all people better than a month now, gripe about y'all every time that dang old dog crossed the start yapping at y'all 24 hours a day, and nobody answered. You called, how you supposed to come out to do anything about that dog if you're just gonna get a dang old computer ain't gonna come over here and just shut that dang old dog up?
He just backs away.
That's a direct parody of that guy calling MTV complaining. But that doesn't happen very much, but I love when a real person or a like quote unquote real world person encounters Boomhauer and has no idea what to do. Like there's a great episode, again, we're referencing all these episodes that happened much later, but Boomhauer is kind of like a dog to women. There's an episode where he actually falls in love and is in love with a woman who sort of does the same thing to him. And like when she leaves him, she's like, sorry, I have no idea what you're saying.
Oh, yeah. In the Snipe Hunt episode, there's the good gag on that too, where they're trying to keep a secret that they killed this endangered bird.
Yeah.
And then Boomhauer just tells on them to the cops immediately.
Yeah.
And the cop doesn't understand.
They do so much with what could be a one-note joke. It's amazing. Like a Boomhauer joke feels like a stunt to me. Like, what are they going to do this time?
and I love in that clip too, you can hear the dog barking in the background. That dog barking is still a problem for him.
Good Foley.
Then we get a quick scene with Bobby and Joseph, which when I watched this pilot when it was new, I didn't have tons of years of King of the Hill that I watched for context, so I only thought of it in relationship to Beavis and Butthead. This was the new show from the Beavis and Butthead guy. And Bobby and Joseph interacting felt like real Beavis and Butthead goofing on their dad.
There's a gray shirt and a blue shirt guy next to each other.
You're right.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Which one likes Death Rock?
Oh, Skull.
And there's also some gags in there in this episode with reddening faces that they kind of drop that, which he did that. Like if you watch Office Space, the first short he did, and this happens in Beavis and Butthead too, faces redden a lot in other Mike Judge animation. So I think it was just them borrowing that animation style early, and they're like, it doesn't really work for this world.
Yeah, when all the characters have flat colors and shading in this world, it just feels off to see just blotches appear on their faces.
Mm-hmm. And also just their very realistic, sad suburban time waster of trying to throw pebbles into the muffler. I think it's very telling when Bobby repeats things that his dad said. They're not things he said. He's not quoting Hank. He's making up new words, which I think shows you, it gives you insight into what Bobby thinks his dad thinks of him. He's not much, but he's all I've got. Hank didn't say that to Twig Boy. So that's what Bobby really thinks his dad thinks of him. That talks to the disappointment he'll mention later. And that also shows that like Bobby doing these funny imitations is him trying to be creative and funny in this, stilting world around him.
It's like it is comedy through adversity, which I think is what the crucible that comedy writers are forged in, just pain and sadness.
And then we come back from that. Hank is offended by a pair of panties. He's just like, just to see them, the sight of them. And we get Brittany Murphy's best scene in the episode.
Good God, Peggy, this was on my road and track.
Luann, honey, could we talk to you?
Oh, wait, not while I'm here.
Mama's in jail. She was saving a quart of beer for before bed, and Daddy threw it out, and she went after him with a fork, and the trailer tipped over, and everything went upside down, and it's all going to be on Real Stories of the Highway Patrol. And the wig I styled for Beauty Academy is ruined. What am I going to do, Uncle Hank?
There. You can stay with us till your mama comes home, and you'll style a new wig better than before. I'll let you use my tools.
Oh, Thanks, Uncle Hank.
She has got to go.
Yeah, they set up Luann living there in like 20 seconds.
Yep. Yeah, she has moved in now. This temporary thing is turned permanent.
And 2 episodes come out of that one scene.
Oh, yeah.
At least 2.
At least. Like the fork thing is a recurring thing for a long time. The trailer tipped over. They go to get that trailer. The trailer stays there, but she just assumes because it's tipped over, it's basically destroyed. But then Hank is very mad to learn that no, it's just all that happened was it tipped over, and we can just put it back up.
And then a twister changes Hank's plans again, and he'll just never be free of Luann, that
is one of my favorite moments in the whole show. The ender and the twister, when the twister has like systematically removed all of Hank's clothing until he's totally naked, and his 2 options for covering his genitals are a cactus or the Texas flag, and it takes a while to decide, and he picks the cactus.
I forgot about that joke.
And then at the end of the episode, they say, like, he even took his underwear. No, not his underwear. Like they've all and how the old lady says, like, don't be shy. I seen a barrel of pickles.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah. Pamela Adlon, who is fantastic in the new movie Bumblebee, by the way, she voices so many characters early on, and I feel like they realize that a lot of those characters, even though they're great performances and still different enough, it just sounds a little too much like Bobby maybe, and she doesn't voice characters other than Bobby after a while, except for like young women who have a lot higher pitch than him.
It's reminiscent of how Julie Kavner did more incidental voices in the early seasons of Simpsons, and then they got her to start. And R.I.P. Brittany Murphy.
Yeah,
so good. At the live reading of a King of the Hill, we saw it was a very sad absence of her. But Pamela Adlon does a pretty good Luann.
Yeah, if this show were to come back, and I think it can, I think they could recast Luann with Pamela.
Yeah, just keep it in the family. She could do a good Luann. Obviously, it wouldn't be Brittany Murphy.
And it felt like they were buds off screen, so.
Yeah, I believe they told the story that it was up, if Brittany missed a recording date or was late, that it was up to Pamela to pick her up, which... I think Brittany liked the party.
Yeah,
but,
a bit. I
still love her.
She briefly became a movie star, and Luann left the show, but then Luann came back and was a major character again after a few years.
Yeah, I mean, come on, you can fit in recordings in between being a movie star.
Not when you're in Just Married.
Oh God. Oh, that's right. So then we get to see Twig Boy, and it's a very like low blow about him liking lattes,
and a man named Kenneth.
Yes, yeah, But you're supposed to not like this guy. He's a wuss. He's a typical Hollywood elitist wuss. That he is specifically a Hollywood LA transplant. Let you know how much that you're supposed to hate him in this world. But I think it is important to let you know that by him being from Los Angeles, you're so used to seeing these Hollywood produced shows where LA is this dream space to go to, but it is realistic that to show that in a large part of America, being from Los Angeles is a bad thing. Being from California is a sign of moral failing, or it makes you suspect. Like the second you say, I'm from California, people are like, California, eh?
I've talked about it on other podcasts, but I've been flying a lot in the past few years just to do panels and to do podcast stuff. And whenever I'm flying back to California, I'm at a bar. People are terrified to go to California. They hate it. They're afraid of it. They're disgusted. Just like, there's lots happening. There's a lot happening in the state.
I haven't lived in real America for 13 years because California rules. That's my I mean, when it's not on fire, it's the best.
The parts that aren't on fire are the best. Go there.
But yes, here's Twig Boy's comeuppance here.
Thanks for the latte, Kenneth.
Anthony, could I see you a minute? So on this Hill family case, you couldn't confirm any actual abuse, but you still recommended the state take custody?
Oh yeah. I mean, the whole neighborhood was Redneck City. Did you see in the report how he dented my Geo?
Redneck City. That's pretty funny. Where are you from, son?
Los Angeles.
Yeah, let's see here. Hit by a baseball. So, how did you like old Harvey?
Who's Harvey?
Oh, he's a Little League coach. You did talk to the Little League coach, didn't you?
So that is Gaylord Sartain, who we heard on the last few episodes ago, the Simpsons spinoff showcase. He was playing Big Daddy.
Charles Daddy.
Daddy. Also, we mentioned on that episode that he was an Ernest character. He was Chuck in Chuck and Bobby, and Bobby was the mute, weird younger brother. I think they're supposed to be twin brothers. And I found out through research that Chuck and Bobby and Ernest were all part of the same advertising organization. So they were also characters advertising everything for anyone who wanted them to advertise.
Wow, they have been working with Ernest that early, huh?
Yeah.
Man, I mean, we already said it on Spinoff Showcase, but I do love Gaylord's voice.
It's great.
It is very authentic, like, because that is where he's from. And it shocked me to find out this is the only King of the Hill he ever appears in. Like,
I think it's because Mike Judge did not want to voice Hank initially, and they were auditioning a lot of people, and Gaylord was one of the people who auditioned to be Hank.
I see.
And it would have been wrong for anybody but Mike Judge to be Hank.
Yeah. I love the way that Dave Herman says Los Angeles. It just has a little like extra Los Angeles. Yeah,
I'm probably going to be saying it that way from now on. This place I live in.
Yeah. You're one of those Los Angeles sissy boys now, Matt.
Yep.
Well, we live near San Francisco, so it's only fair.
Oh yeah, and you're in Berkeley, which is just as bad. You SJW.
Oh God, yeah. The People's Republic of Berkeley. So that's another problem I have with this episode, though, that the character of the case manager is presented as a good man who does good things, and he's just making sure that this case, Twig Boy did a bad job. He should have checked with the Little League coach that a baseball did or did not hit Bobby, which would give Hank an alibi. So that's true. But part of me, this is just me, but part of me feels like that case manager is covered for a lot of Hank Hills in his time. And just like, well, can you be sure? Can you be sure? I feel like he's questioned a lot of things like that.
He is a good old boy, it seems like, especially with Gaylord's voice.
Or a Bubba, as Mike Judge refers to those types of guys in describing making the show. The total just rejection of Dave Herman. Well, and the way Dave Herman, it's very real the way Twig Boy says, it's Redneck City. He's used to saying that to receptive audiences to the idea of Redneck City. He didn't read the room correctly to tell this guy.
I like the response, like Redneck City.
That's pretty funny. Where are you from again? And then we get Bobby destroying a stop sign, which is a very Beavis thing to do.
It really is.
Yeah, he's just like drilling on, like he stole it from somewhere.
Super illegal.
And brought it into the driveway and is just like drilling on it. And he's hitting a power drill with a hammer, right?
Yep, so ruining his power drill as well.
It's like Homer fixing Marge's camera.
It's actually the same.
In Lisa's Rival.
Though then we get kind of the message that, well, if you were to follow Twig Boy's suggestions on how to interact with your child, it leads to them being a hellion who's controlling you.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'm not a parent, I can't say, but I don't think that is reality.
Honestly, the worst parts of this episode are the very dated, making fun of touchy-feely therapy talk, which The Simpsons did in Bart's Inner Child.
Yep.
3 or 4 years ago. But I just think those were funny, but whenever I hear those again, like you've activated my shame spiral or any of the things they're doing in this, I mean, yeah, they're silly sounding, but they just feel so dated. I mean, it's a 22-year-old episode, so.
Now that like everyone is in therapy, if you can afford it, everyone's in therapy, so it's a much different world. It's the same thing with like sushi or being a vegetarian, like these things that were weird to us at one point, and now it's just like, yeah, I go to the corner and get like $4 sushi.
Yeah.
But then again, that could be just California ruining us from being real Americans, guys. You know,
I get my CBD milkshakes.
I'm in my bubble. I'm saying this all from my liberal bubble. I don't understand anything about how the flyover states work.
You should hang around some racists, then you'd get centered correctly, guys.
Oh, I do.
I also think Bobby being yelled at for destroying a stop sign is exactly what Tom Anderson has done to Beavis and Butthead in episodes of the show. You're quoting that, like that's the most Tom Anderson moment of the episode. Like, you're quoting that in me, and his head like shakes in the Tom Anderson manner too. And then Bobby gets the information that the investigation has been called off, which he hides from Hank, which shows you that Bobby is not just a stupid child. He's clever enough to know he wants to keep this advantage over his parent.
It was very weird to go back to Beavis and Butthead in the very, very brief window of time in which Tom Anderson and Hank Hill existed concurrently. It was only a few months, but they both existed as Mike Judge characters. So it was very strange.
Then we get a brief scene that shows you that Luann has value. She's not just this ditz who goes to beauty school, that she could, but that's her problem, is that I think Luann, this early version of Luann, lives in a world where she sees no upward mobility, that her mom and dad are just trash, and that she feels like trash, and that when she actually has incredible mechanical skills, she just doesn't even think of them as real or useful.
Or a career she could have even,
Yeah. She thinks she's supposed to go to beauty school. That's the best she can do. And so, then Bobby gets to messing around with Hank quite a bit here.
What in the heck? Don't you see I'm working here? Close the dang door. Bob, just stop hitting that button. Give me that thing.
Dad, that's not respectful adult-child growth dialogue.
I'll give you dialogue that's not coming from a center of anger. Please return the garage door to its factory preset down position.
That is cool.
And that's just them laughing together, Beavis and Butthead style. It's getting this guy.
Joseph eventually becomes Butthead, though.
Yes, yeah.
Later in the series, when he goes through puberty, he becomes a Butthead or Beavis character.
I don't know. I'm not ready. Well, he's just so, that's one of the few great voice actors on the show who's not present in the early seasons is Breckin Meyer as Joseph, as puberty Joseph, who's just sexually frustrated and confused at all times.
He's got a real anxious Kirk Van Houten before he starts talking, too.
Yeah, we get a little montage of them messing with Hank, and he's wearing a brown shirt that he very rarely wears. Lady Bird in Hank's clothes, pretty funny. I do like, and they're just laughing at him. And then we get Bobby gets exposed though once the guy returns to Redneck City to explain things.
What on God's green earth are you making those noises for?
They're sound effects, like that guy in Police Academy. That's what I'm gonna do when I grow up, I decided. And Dad can't say boo about it.
Bobby, a man from the Child Protective Services just came by. Now, he said that he told you last week that this investigation was off.
Oh. Please don't tell Dad.
Well, son, I have to. He's been worried.
But I like him better this way.
How come?
I can make him love me even when I screw up.
Is that what you think?
Oh,
that's a little too sentimental for Bobby to say. Greg Daniels on the commentary says, "Oh, that's a little too on the nose. I wish we would have rewritten that line."
Well, yeah, it's too in touch with his emotions and understanding them, I suppose.
Characters shouldn't say what they're feeling. That makes me angry.
I mean, but they do need this emotional shift, because otherwise Bobby's just doing this for the obvious reasons of, well, it's fun to torture my dad because he normally has power over me. Like that's really what it feels like.
I mean, as treacly as that line is, it does get to me.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I said it before, I'm a soft boy with father issues, and so this fear was definitely mine as well. I didn't have the happy ending in this episode, but it was this feeling of just like, well, yeah, I'm a disappointment to him, so I gotta at least I gotta force him to love me if he's always disappointed in me. Like, ouch, like that hurts.
Yeah. But I do love how Hank is upset to hear that's what Bobby thinks later in this next scene.
That's good too, that they do think the PC Babble stuff is bad, but that Hank does need to be more in touch with his emotions, as we see in this scene.
So great.
It's hard, Peggy. I don't want to lose my little boy, my only son. But it's hard.
Well, you can relax. The investigation has been off for a week, only Bobby didn't tell us.
I'll kill him!
All right, calm down, honey. Now let me explain. He didn't do it to be mean. Bobby honestly doesn't think that you love him all the time.
That's crazy. Of course I love him.
Very good. Now, say it to Bobby.
What are you talking about?
I want you to tell Bobby that your love for him is unconditional.
Well, I can't say that. I can't. You know how I was raised, what my father's like.
I got my shins blown off by a Japan man's machine gun. So don't come crying to me with your problems.
Honey, I'm begging you. For the sake of this family, you have got to do it. He's waiting for you out on the porch.
Oh, jeez. Twig boy comes over here and
We get a nice little sliver of both Cotton Hill and John Redcorn. They're working in as many characters as possible in this episode.
Love that.
Yeah.
I completely forgot Cotton was in this episode.
And as a first-time viewer, you're like, that wacky character, we'll never see him again. Like, what is this? Who even is that?
There's
a while where you only see Cotton in flashbacks.
Yeah,
Like, he doesn't
yeah.
show up for a good while.
And I love with him, the Cotton, you see the Cotton is horrible to everyone but Bobby.
Yeah.
Somebody who you think he'd be mean to. Like, the show often is about surprising you on your assumptions. And one of them is like, well, this guy who was so cruel to Hank when Hank was a good son will be really cruel to this soft little boy. Instead, he just loves Bobby unconditionally, which only makes his cruelty to Hank seem worse.
And weirdly enough, the entire, like, just his vocabulary revolves around Hank. So there's Hank, Hank's wife, and then his child he has later is Good Hank.
Good Hank.
Yeah.
Oh, God, yes.
People are going to think I'm bad Hank.
And also, I mean, Cotton's death scene in
It's great.
One of the best. I
Yeah.
love that Peggy knows what a horrible, awful person he is in general, and he hates her too.
It's one of the more redeeming scenes with Peggy in episodes. I mean, they go a little too far with her sometimes in making her a despicable character who is very self-centered and narcissistic, but that's a great Peggy moment.
She loves Hank and just wants him to be happy and not be hurt by his father any longer. And I guess technically she succeeds at that by getting Cotton to kill himself.
Yeah. And also her bonding with Cotton after breaking all of her bones is also a great scene.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that one too, that it ends with Hank telling her all I know is that obviously my dad didn't do all those war stories, but they did survive World War II and having his feet tied to his knees, so that's got to be something. Yeah, so in the last scene here, we get a rather an uncomfortable, touching ending that I feel like this is also a slight rejection of sitcom tropes that it just takes so long for it to happen.
Yeah.
You would think like, well, in a written show, it would be better paced, but
Like more pithy too.
But here's just how uncomfortable an actual human would be saying these things.
You're my son. Well, you know, with everything that entails, feelings of fondness and more, you know what I mean, don't you, boy?
No.
Well, oh, that's a hell of a weird sound. I never made that before. Family. You're not making this easy on me, boy. Okay. I love you no matter what you do. There. Phew. Let's go get something to eat.
I'm not. Just a big disappointment to you.
Disappointment? No, you make me proud. I've been disappointed by just about everything else in this town, but you? Not once. Damn it, you're my boy. You know better than that.
He punched him. I knew it. I told him. Did you see that?
See what, quick boy?
Never mind.
I mentioned it before on other podcasts, but I love the series F is for Family. It reminds me of a very, just like this, a very character-driven show about a very, well-defined place. But I feel like it is missing the sweetness of scenes like this. I feel like that show is very funny, but it's always so cruel. And I feel like no character really loves another character. Their love is just begrudging and obligatory, but there's always cynicism to it. But here, this is the real sweetness of the show. Despite how dark it can get, despite how ugly the characters can get, I do like the underlying sweetness to the relationships. Like, Hank does not hate Bobby. There are many real fathers who despise their children who are too different, but there is, it's slightly unrealistic, I guess, in this case, but there is underlying love and sweetness to it.
I also love F is for Family, and I've been rewatching a lot of Bob's Burgers lately after we did the Thanksgiving podcast, and I'm noticing that is also very in the mold of King King of the Hill, especially
Absolutely.
in the like, you're terrible, you're all terrible, like that kind of stuff. It feels very King of the Hill to me.
Bob is a Hank Hill figure as well, too. Yes, though
So, like a put upon every man. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Though he's more understanding of the world. He comes from the world like, no, I like everything. I'm a burger artist, though. Like he's definitely in the Hill mold. When you mentioned F is for Family, Bob, that made me think of in the first episode of that show, or second, there's a real opposite scene of his firstborn son screaming at his dad, "I fucking hate you."
Yeah.
And his dad is this close to punching him until he goes to the garage to hit his punching bag so he doesn't punch his children. Like,
he never puts them through a wall like he claims to.
Yes.
Want to.
But it's so like, it is a mean show but it's also just about like, you're all driven ragged by existence that you're cruelest to the people around you because life is awful.
It's much more realistic in that sense, but I love the altered reality of King of the Hill where people can love each other despite their huge differences.
Well, Hank isn't as economically troubled
That
as
is true.
F is for Family is, though.
He's got a nice middle class lifestyle.
But guy, yes, that's a great exit there. A great exit of Twig Boy being rejected by Texas. Like this world will keep existing. It doesn't need your LA values. Get back to LA, Twig Boy. What was that, Twig Boy? Like that just delivery there. I also just like putting on my Southern man voice. It's fun. But
everyone knows him as Twig Boy.
Twig Boy. They just know, just looking at him, you're like, you're a Twig Boy. That's what you are.
I'm sure I would be one if I went to Texas.
Oh, yeah. Or girl hair.
Girl hair, Twig Boy.
I mean, they're not making fun of his girly haircut, which he also has. Like, he breaks all the rules of manhood, Anthony does. Well, same with like Anthony. Like he should be Tony.
Tony.
You don't go by Anthony. That's a wussy boy's name.
Yeah. Fix it again, Anthony.
These are all the rules of life in the South that you just know. It's like, well, men don't do that. Men don't do that. It's a very oppressive life. It sucks. But this show doesn't suck. This was a funny pilot.
I haven't watched the pilot in a long time, and I forgot how good it is. I mean, it's not quite the pace I like the show to reach, but it's still very funny. The characters are mostly who they are, except for Peggy, and she's still funny. I hope we can do this for our Talking Simpsons Patreon next miniseries in 2019. The voting should be happening soon for that, I'm guessing, right?
Yes, yeah. King of the Hill will be one of the choices, among others. No Futurama in this first one because I feel like that would just win. But
yeah, Futurama gets one turn off. And it looks like with what our Patreon is doing, we might do 2 miniseries in 2019. So who knows what we'll do after that.
And they'll all be exclusive to the Patreon at patreon.com/Talking Simpsons. But I feel like we're getting ahead of ourselves on plugs. We should give Matt some more plug time.
Matthew J., thanks for joining us. We mentioned your stuff up top. Can you remind everybody where we can find you and what your projects are?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Mr. Matt J. And my main 2 things are, we'll watch Mitch live at Mitch.live, which is happening about once a month. The talk show where the host doesn't know who the guests are going to be, what the jokes are, sometimes when and where it's happening. And the host, of course, is Mike Mitchell from Doughboys, who is one of the funniest guys in the world. So he rolls with it and is great. And his co-host from Doughboys, Nick Weiger, is going to be on my other podcast that I mentioned earlier.
Killer.
The Deep End.
The corny ass Nick Weiger? Wow.
We have the Burger Boy himself, Nick Weiger, coming on to talk about some Adult Swim stuff, and he's worked on Adult Swim shows like many of our guests. And that's over at, you can just search on iTunes, The Deep End. It's the one with brackets around it. There are a couple shows called that, but we're the only one currently, I think. We very quickly rose to like the easiest one to search for. For a day or two, it was hard to find, but we got enough reviews that it went up there. We're watching everything that's ever been aired on Adult Swim, including things that reran from Cartoon Network, specials that only aired once, like Night of the Living Dew. We're going to cover everything with a bunch of awesome guests. Weiger is not the secret guest that I couldn't say earlier. I'm still not going to say, but I will tell you, you're not going to believe it when we get to it. It's nuts. And my other show is the Cartoons 101 podcast, which is at patreon.com/Cartoons101, where I interview animation creators like Bill Oakley, like Alan Denton, who I mentioned earlier, Jeff Trammell from Craig of the Creek.
Oh, I didn't know you did Jeff.
I had Jeff on. He came over to my house. Jeff's a super cool guy. He's one of the coolest guys in the world. He's a good buddy.
We're Twitter buddies.
And,
I need to, I'm looking forward to having him on a future What a Cartoon, I think.
Yeah,
Fingers
totally.
crossed.
Oh, yeah, get him on. He's going to be annoyed that he wasn't on for King of the Hill. But,
oh, no.
Get him on. He's a super cool dude.
Let's re-record this with Jeff.
no. Yeah. When you come back down to LA, we'll hang out.
Los
We'll get 'em
Angeles?
for you. Los Angeles. Bunch of awesome stuff over there. And there's also a Patreon for the Deep End where you get an extra podcast that every week is about the Venture Brothers. We're going through every single episode of the Venture Brothers, which may be a hint for who our special guest is. I won't say it.
Ooh,
but,
my God. I'm
check
excited.
that out at patreon.com/the Deep End.
So yes, I mentioned it before, but if this is your first exposure to a What a Cartoon style podcast, check out What a Cartoon. You can find that wherever you find podcasts. Like I said, we go through a ton of animated series, a different episode from a different series every week, and that comes out every Monday. And that is supported by the TalKing Simpsons Network. So if you want to support our show and get a ton of bonus podcasts on top of that, go to patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. And for the subscription fee of $5 a month, you can get every episode of Talking Simpsons and What a Cartoon a week ahead of time and ad-free. And there are so many bonuses on top of that. I mentioned our exclusive series that we do for the Patreon. Those are only on the Patreon. And they have included so far a Talking Critic in our first year, Talking Futurama in our second year, and who knows what it'll be. It'll probably be King of the Hill, I'm guessing. But there could be a fourth series in 2019 if we raise a few $100 more and hit our $11,000 goal. And it seems very likely at this point. So if you sign up today, you get a nice little code you can drop into your podcast machine, and you can access dozens and dozens of bonus episodes. So many to catch up on if you've never been part of the Patreon before. And Patreon also has a very good app you can use if you want to listen that way as well. And Henry, we have a new $10 podcast that people can listen to, and it's all about movies. Can you talk about that?
At the $10 level, we used to offer a monthly video, which you can still see all the previous videos. They are available to everybody who signs up at the $10 level. But now, each month, we will be doing a different animated film for our What a Cartoon Movie podcast, me and Bob. We talked about Batman Mask of the Phantasm in November. December was Kiki's Delivery Service. January is looking to be Akira, just in time for 2019, which is when the film is set. So you will be able to hear all those if you up your pledge to $10 a month. I think you get a real good deal out of that for the amount you pay. And it helps me and Bob do this full time. And also, I want to say there's just a few days left when you're listening to this.
Oh my gosh.
But Talking Simpsons is doing a live podcast in San Francisco on January 16th, 8 p.m. at the Gateway Theater. You can find the tickets to it at sfsketchfest.com. Look for it on the schedule. Me and Bob will be doing our episode for Principal and the Pauper, the Armin Tamzarian episode, and we will have special guests there, Julia Prescott and Allie Gertz of the Everything's Coming Up Simpsons podcast. So it is a Simpsons podcast crossover event live January 16th, 8 p.m. at the Gateway Theater in downtown San Francisco.
It's like the Avengers for Simpsons podcast, right? Is that how it works?
Yes. They said that Infinity War was the greatest crossover of all time. That's the meme.
Which Infinity Gem am I? Yellow? Who knows? Ask yourself at home. Hair. Thank you so much for listening, folks. As for me, I've been one of your hosts, Bob Mack. You can find me on Twitter as Bob Servo. My other podcast is Retronauts, the classic gaming podcast. Check it out at retronauts.com or look for Retronauts in your podcast machine. It's been going on since 2006, and I think we have almost 500 episodes so far, so just dig into the backlog and see what you like, and if you like it, please subscribe. Henry, how about you?
Hey, I'm Henry Gilbert, and you can find me on Twitter at HENEREYG. When there's updates to the shows and all the other podcasts and everything that's going on the Patreon, I share it there on my Twitter account, along with lots of other things. One more time, that's HENEREYG.
Thank you for joining us, folks. We'll see you next week for the City of New York versus Homer Simpson. Thank you for listening.
Get out of my house, my boy ain't much, but he's all I got.